envelope with like no backing on it. Like, thankfully, nothing was damaged. But
pretty terrible.
Yeah, considering also the postman came up, it's like, this counts as a package. You owe us $3 in postage.
Oh my God, are we live?
Yeah, I just clicked it. Yeah. Wow. So the guy mismailed it, and then you got charged $3, Andy.
Yeah, and he sent like a board game item with no protection whatsoever, just put in a plain envelope.
Amateurs.
I'm like, really? Okay. It was kind of BS. If it had actually been damaged, I would have been pissed.
Yeah. Here is a link to that good old pop-out chat.
Oh, yeah, let's throw open the...
Hey, we got a couple of folks there. Hey, sorry about the delay. I sent a message to these guys in our chat with a picture of my computer saying 45% done of an update. This will take a while, and that was like about. I started watching at about 10 till. So, and it finally got done at like 9:01.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Updates. Fun stuff.
Hooray for Windows.
Oh.
Hey, they were starting to get people watching it now. Some people are showing up. And I did drop it in the guild. You know, the old... See how much of the old guard will be here to join us. And there's Trent. Hello, Trent.
Hey, how are
tough. You? There's like, was it the Deep End's live streaming tonight? Heavy Cardboard's live streaming tonight.
They're all taking our Thursday night. Come on. Come on, guys.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. Well, we will be getting ready to go here, and it's going to be great with or without. Well, I don't know. It's going to be, I wish there was more folks here.
Yep. Okay. I will be fully here until Joe's review, and then I'll go watch Heavy Cardboard. No, I'm kidding.
What?
I won't do that.
Nice, Andy.
I would never actually do that. I know.
You would just have it and have us muted.
Muted, watching Kitten Academy.
Yep. That I can understand.
That would be no betrayal. It's kittens, man. They're cute.
Yep. Yep.
True.
So,
next will be my design, Kitten Academy, the dexterity game.
Yeah. Andy's going to design a dexterity game that he won't touch with a 10-foot pole.
With real kittens. It's going to be like Crokinole, except you'll get a call from like animal abuse.
Well, the theme of tonight's episode is ethical questions in gaming. So,
well, I can honestly say the reason I picked up Cataclysm: A Second World War is one of the people who commented on it said I would kill a kitten for this game. So at that point, I knew I had to pick it up.
Yeah. Well, it's like me, when I was teaching. This was last year. Because I always fake being vastly more evil than I actually am. But one of the 8th grade girls near the end of the year was like, "Oh, Mr. Dennison, I kept a notebook for the last 2 years of all the weird things you've said in class." And I'm like, Autumn, outside of context, that's probably legally actionable.
Did you scare her? I'm sorry, here's my notebook.
No, it'd be like legally actionable against me.
That's even better.
Be like, no, I wasn't really poisoning the 8th grade banquet. It was a joke.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, it was taken out of context. Yes, I understand.
Oh, Andy, so many things. It's probably best. It's probably best to have it this way with you leaving education, because so many things I'd be like, man, I don't think I would say that.
No. It works in middle school realms, but yeah, no. If you have the easily offended type, and I'm very careful about who I kind of tease. If
every middle school teacher is at their heart a nihilist.
Oh, they're insane. You have to be insane to be.
The world is so black and bleak.
No hope.
That's only. I only ever felt that way in education. about third or fourth quarter when the 8th graders were starting to act like freshmen. That's when I was like, about half of them like, I'm gonna miss you, and the other half I'm like, can I send them now?
I would say that like when seniors are done, that's like senioritis is a real thing, and dealing with freshmen, I get to avoid it for the most part. But yeah, I can imagine that like when they're about done as 8th graders, they're like, I'm done here. I'm a high schooler. You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah, we
grown up.
Yeah, and I could handle that when it happens in like late April, like normal. This last year's class, it was like February. It's like,
well, it was like that for me too, and I kind of blamed that this class, which was like fantastic up to that point, and then it hit hard, and it was like they just had so many kids that were all like younger brothers and sisters of kids that were graduating, like that were actually seniors, and so it just so happens like with the rhythm that every so many years you end up with a class that's just packed, with a disproportionate amount of younger brothers and sisters. There's so many babies in babies of the family in this year's class.
Yeah.
So
ours was like, literally mid-April, and they're like, so this is the last test we're having for the year? Like, well, you have 6 weeks left. 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to do what I like to refer to as until the last day's essays. Every day is just going to be an essay. That's what we're doing.
There's a teacher that I taught across the hall from that he would write like a 2-sentence prompt and then say, write 300 words about this using like Google. And that was it every single day. I had to sub for him. Yeah. And it was like, man, I don't blame you guys for not caring when this is what you're dealing with on a daily basis.
Oh, so we did that in speech class, but that was like impromptu speeches.
Oh, I don't know. Like,
that was
draw
easy.
Something out of a hat and then talk about it. Like, but that's different. Like,
I never had any trouble.
Like you're trying to learn history, but there was no real teacher there. It was,
I have long asserted that like science and history can be among your favorite class, or it's absolutely god awful and it's completely based on the teacher. Like history can be massively fascinating, but if you've got nothing but like a dates, memorize the dates and what happened kind of teacher, like it is like stab me in the eyes boring.
For sure. All right, well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get it kicked off. I'm actually going to continue the conversation too, but I did want to start actually recording because what I want to say is something I want on the actual episode. So 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, The Bored, and The Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, The Bored, The Ugly, Joe Sallin. I'm joined tonight by our former teacher now, Andy Dennison. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing pretty good. It's still summer, so like the new stay-at-home dad thing hasn't kicked in. That'll happen in August.
But that's basically what you've been doing for your last years as a teacher anyway. So yeah, it's
but it's trying to balance career and stay-at-home dad. That was not fun.
Good friend of mine is retiring this year after 39 years as a tennis coach, 45 years as a teacher, 40 of which were at our school. And he and I are still working together with tennis camp, and it still hasn't hit because it's not until August when that hits. When you're like, I should be getting ready, and you're not. So I think, Andy, you're going to feel a weight off your shoulders. But anyway, I know in my buddy Jeff's case, like 45 years, that's like so integral to who you are that it's good that he's going on a very long cross country and even across the Atlantic trip.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's Andy Dennison. Also joining from the West Coast, TC Reed, who's got a daughter who's going into is it going to be her sophomore year now, or is this finally this is her first year of high school, right? She would be in my class this year, right, TC? 9th grade?
Yeah, she's it's freshman is the over here. It's the freshman is 9th grade is the first year of high school.
Yeah, for us too. That's what I teach all freshmen in my classes. So this is not a podcast about education. It just sounds like it is.
Yeah, don't remind me. I've got a daughter going to high school. That's gonna be fun.
She's still your little girl, TC. And speaking of high school teachers, one more guy here is married to a high school teacher, which actually I guess that makes 2 of us that are married to high school teachers. That would be me and Trent Ham. Trent, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing?
I'm all right, you know. Like I said, married to a high school teacher. I am a high school teacher, and that's the reason I'm talking so much about teaching. Is you've been listening to Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. Maybe you've heard us mention it before, maybe not. But we are now part of a cardboard core. I can't say
We're part of it.
Say the word every time I try to say it. It's cardboard cohorts, and I want to see cardboard core heart every time. It is impossible.
Say it 5 times fast right now.
Cardboard core hearts. Core heart. I can't say it. Quarterbacks. Cardboard quarterbacks. That's what
we're part of a collective.
I don't call myself an alpha gamer. I think of myself as a cardboard quarterback.
Oh my God.
The thing is, though, as a teacher, you might maybe some people that listen to this are looking for maybe you do homeschooling. Maybe you just like to think of yourself as an involved parent in your child's education, and there's some resources out there, and they are called board games. And one of the ways that you can find the right board games for teaching your kid is a new podcast that is available from our cardboard
our cardboard collective,
our cardboard cohorts.
This is not going to get old.
And his name is I should say the guy who started it. That I first met is Norm, but he's not doing it alone. He's got a buddy named Ryan, who's also they were both high school teachers, and they find ingenious ways to integrate education and cardboard and board games. They played diplomacy. They've used for sale. Between math and history and social studies. Really, really cool stuff. I'm just thrilled with the format that they've taken, which is a very help you, like a sort of like how-to approach, like they say like a lesson idea of what they want to do and then how they're going to bring it about. Anyway, this is called Cardboard in the Classroom, and you will find it on iTunes under the Bridge City Board Gamers. They're up there in warm and sunny Saskatoon for this nice little gasp of summer that they have every year. But Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, and 2 high school teachers providing an amazing resource. It's a huge resource to anybody out there that's involved in education, and we all are part of it. You know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and you are part of that, whether or not you want to be. So anyway, check them out at Cardboard in the Classroom on the Bridge City Board Gamers on iTunes. Also, Cardboard Conjecture, a review podcast that they do that's not education focused, but they are going very in-depth and doing a great job of talking about many different facets of some amazing games that don't get much attention. So check that out, Bridge City Board Gamers. Our cardboard cohorts.
How to teach biology using Phil Eklund games.
Seriously, dude, you could do that. Like I'm not kidding.
It would take you 2 quarters just to get him to play the game right.
Oh, dude, yeah. By the end of quarter 1, you're going to have completed 1 round.
Imagine the payoff when they play High Frontier and the rocket just can't even get orbital trajectory and it explodes in outer space. It'd be so worth it.
As an educator, getting to watch dreams die. Oh yeah, priceless.
Never gets old, does it?
Why I come to work every day. Yeah, never gets old.
You know what was great is for an entire year, you know those like motivational posters they have in schools where they have like a picture, a word, and a saying? I had a Despair Incorporated one up in my classroom for like a year, and the principal never noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like, it showed a shooting star and it said wishes, and then the quote was, when you wish on a shooting star, your dreams really can come true, unless it's one of those end-all life on earth varieties.
I think Andy has those.
There's one that said potential and had a picture of a large fry, and it said not everyone gets to be an astronaut.
Like somebody working at McDonald's. Nice. Oh, goodness. Well, we talk here about board games and also life occasionally and many different other aspects of it. But we try not to talk too much about life. That would drive us all insane. Speaking of Norm. Yeah. That's how I greet you now, Norm. Oh, boy. And it's great to see Dean in our chat here, Dean and Norm, and we had Paul there joining. It's just so awesome to hear from you guys. Thank you very much for joining and choosing the good, the bored, and the ugly. Oh, it's okay, Norm. Norm has already apologized in our chat. And
already?
Quick, we're having a couple questions in the chat about cardboard cohorts. Is that just like a network? See, I can say it right. Anyway.
Wow, Andy. Oh, dude. How do you spell that, Andy?
Spelling's all bets are off. I didn't say it. But they were questioning, is that a new podcasting network or what were you going with on that?
I mean, it's a good question. I think that it's just something that Norm actually cooked it up. He's the cardboard cohort cook, and it's just kind of to describe the sort of symbiotic relationship that we have with specifically with the Bridge City board gamers, with the stuff that they have coming out. So I mean, we just kind of promote each other, and I guess I don't want to say it's a media network because we're part of Punchboard Media. Right. Which you hear advertisements on, and that's kind of just a nice place to post stuff. And it's something where actually, Norm, we need to start putting your stuff on Punchboard Media now that I think of it. But anyway, that's a business talk. The thing is, it's mainly just to describe, like, we want to support each other. Love what Norm is doing. Norm's been very supportive and a fan first of the podcast here, and also has been a valuable contributor in many different ways. I mean, we've had him on as a guest host here. We've had him on the Longview. We're going to have Ryan, who's the other member of the Bridge City Board Gamers, the other main producer, and we're going to have him on something soon once we can just get the details worked out, the old deets. But anyway, yeah, we're just buds. That's all that it is. That's what cohorts are. I think that it is what we make it, and I'm just really thrilled to be able to be a part of whatever Norm is doing. He's pretty great. Though, it's not his fault.
Sorry about it though.
Oh yeah. It's not his fault, but he's pretty great.
But the question, can we still work with him now that like Canada's a security threat?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I know that whole White House burning down in 1812. Yeah, that could be a big
CIA is watching our podcast right now because.
Is our war with Canada going to be the next coin game?
Yeah, Fortress America really got it wrong. It's all coming from the north.
Yeah.
Boy. I'm still wondering when they're going to build a border wall.
Hey, Ulakai, there's the John Company. No, Pax Ren winner. Sorry, I'm getting Sierra Madre Games mixed up in my own head here. We are going to be reviewing John Company in today's episode. So of Pax Ren and John Company were part of Andy's gaming on Sunday night. So
I didn't do Pax Ren. I just did John Company.
Well, that's all you need to do.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't play Pax Ren? Oh, was that played before you got there?
It was either before or it was while we were playing.
It was already going when he got there.
He just wasn't intimidated by playing it. I figured he saw it and went,
We pulled one of those, Andy's not here, let's play Pax Ren. Or Trent's not here, let's play Dominant Species.
Yeah.
You guys must be playing Rex all the time then, huh?
Yeah. We've always got a game going in the back. So it's great to hear from people in our chat, though. And come and join us when we live record these every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's one of those things that you can count on. We're here. And if we're not going to be here, then you should join the guild on Board Game Geek to figure out, because it's not very often when we miss episodes. But sometimes, we record at different times and stuff. And the way that I post information is on that the Good Board Ugly Guild in the Board Game Geek. It's guild number 2173. So it's in our advertisements and stuff. It's in, I don't want to say advertisements, it's in our breaks that you'll hear all about it. So anyway, thank you very much for choosing Good Board Ugly and for being a part of this podcast community, because I'm really looking forward to meeting up with people when I finally get that chance to go to conventions in your area, or when you come to something maybe that is within a stone's throw of the upper Midwest. So anyway, yeah.
Or just come see me because I'm lonely.
TC is out in Portland and he's representing, and it's TC. Put our hands up we'll put our hands up here to the video cameras and try to sense each other's presence through the ether. But yeah, TC's over there, like I said before, on the West Coast. So you won't get to see me if you go to a convention on the West Coast unless I'm making it there. So anyway, let's go ahead and get these reviews kicked off. And let's get her started with what we've already been teasing about. Let's drop the ball right now, Andy, and we're going to talk about the trials and tribulations of
John Company. So we got to play a few more games of this, and I've got a pretty good handle on, I think, the basic game of it. What we were trying to do last weekend was actually play the full campaign game. A guy in our group really wants to play a full game of this before he moves here in the next couple months. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Full game.
Bring it.
Except the company failed in the third round, so he never got the Monopoly revoked.
No, this is the shortest game we've ever played. None of the rules were changed from what I knew. And so, yeah, the full campaign, quote unquote,
died
in not a thing.
Died in round 3. And then, of course, I'm like, I'm going to turn that that fourth card over, and it's going to be the Monopoly revoked card. And so I turned it over, and it was indeed the Monopoly. If we could have survived one more round.
I am so want to hear you talk about the companies that you can make on your own.
I want to so bad. So
yeah,
I don't know. The goal is to give it another try.
Once you play like the end game and figure out how that works, there's a huge incentive to keep the company going till the monopoly is revoked. It really is.
And that's what I've heard from a lot of people that have played it more extensively, which I think is the reason I'm really trying to get that to happen. Because almost all the complaints I've heard about John Company with random, it's all because they're playing the basic game and they're not getting to that Monopoly revoked stage where a lot of all that complaints will fall away pretty quickly. So I really want to try it so I can get what I feel would be the full experience of the game. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the basic game as well and would have no trouble playing it, but I want to see the full experience, and I want to see, I'm assuming, I trust the opinion of the people who say that, the randomness is better, it's fine when you get to that full campaign game. And so, I don't know, that's what we're trying to do. Hopefully we will get there next time and try it.
Yeah, start with the late game and just play through it so you can figure out how those companies work when the monopolies are revoked. Yeah. And then once we did that and we're like, and the lights went off and we went back to play the full campaign, like everyone was like hardcore trying to keep the company afloat so they could just cash out and run their own company.
Yeah. The one thing that's happened twice now to me and John Company, and I'm thinking it's something you've got to take care of if it happens at the beginning game, where like just loads of people rolled shares. So we had like 9 or 10 share cubes in there. And I'm just, it feels like after the 2 times that's happened to me that if you end up with a setup like that, it almost behooves you to set up a situation where a bunch of a angry shareholder situation where you'll kick out a lot of those cubes to get it down to a manageable level. Because if you're having to make dividend payments of ours was like 9 or 10 or something like that, trying to get that in the early game is really, really hard, and still have like enough money to do anything. And the elephant was like especially
And you also, when you're in a situation like that, you also want to explore those different ports and get those things flipped over as soon as possible to get money coming in.
Yeah. Well, and when we rolled the elephant, like the first 2 rounds of the elephant moving around, I swear to God, every roll was a 5 or 6.
Yeah, what happened was the first roll was a 5 or a 6, and then that caused the the sort of stability to swing towards the unstable, which now you're rolling 2 dice at disadvantage, and so the odds of it being a 5 or a 6 is like now 33. It's like 66% that it's going to be a 5 or a 6. So like we just kept on seeing hammers of 5s and 6s that would cause places to revolt or attack places that we were doing business with and wrest control of them from us. It was really, really rough. We have a really good question here in the chat, and that is, I'm just going to read it because it's from Ulakai, and he says, for John Company, I want to hear the kind of negotiations or deals people come up with, different play styles or different styles of play people have seen. I'm not sure if my group is playing it to its full potential. So, Andy, what would you have to say to that?
Maybe this might be where I want to jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Trent. Yeah.
Trent's done some interesting things.
I've negotiated almost every possible element of this game. Whenever I have an opportunity to make a decision, I'm usually wheeling and dealing with the other people for cubes almost every time I make any decision at all on this. Like, I'm willing to make a decision in your favor if you throw me a cube or something like that. And I'll go again and again and again and again and again. And the reason I want to accumulate cubes is so that, like, if I do blatant nepotism, I'm just giving back the cubes I've already got. And I want to do blatant nepotism later. I accumulate cubes for the purpose of nepotism mostly. And so every time I make a decision, I'm like, I want your cube, I want your cube, I want your cube, I want your cube, I want your cube. I'll gladly do whatever you want to get your cube. That's because when a key point comes and I really have to make a choice, I'm like, forget you guys, I'm promoting my nephew. That's really my philosophy on it. So if you're wanting to know about negotiation, literally anytime you're making a choice amongst other players, you should be negotiating and trying to get yourself a cube out of the deal.
Yeah, and I think definitely early game getting the cubes is better than getting $1 or $2 from them.
Yep, I want cubes.
Yeah, it's like $2 as opposed to that $1. I mean, like a penny in hand is one thing. What do you find, TC? Because you've played this one out there a little bit, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm going to agree with Andy on this one. It's like once you learn that in game and you with your own the monopoly breaks, that's where you can just start wheeling. You have to wheel and deal to get that company going. You cannot start a company by yourself with your own money unless you've done like that goes in your direction tremendously on rolls and payouts and stuff. So the way I negotiate with this game is I'm always keeping my eye out for that the possibility of me starting my own company, because once you get that company going and you can generate points, and at the end of the game all the money generation you have just converts straight into points, and you can like swing that game in your favor. So when I'm negotiating ahead of time, you know, or Trent's like getting cubes, I am really genuinely trying to say, look, we need to get this thing to succeed and get going. And so I'm willing to make a lot. I would give Trent cubes out the butt to get that game going to the Monopoly, because when the Monopoly hits, that's when things are going to switch for me.
That's when things kind of turn around. So just so you can know the dynamic, because I was actually in this game of John Company. Yeah, the dynamic here was that it was Andy and one other player who were familiar with the game. And then there's me. I played once before, and I would not call myself familiar because I just kind of like was essentially getting taught as we played, which I think is probably the best way to play John Company, because
if you're learning it is for sure.
So much of it is just like you just need to kind of get the game going, and then you can kind of pick up things as it goes. But the game is going to play out in a specific way, and it's just a matter of you seeing how that plays out. And what's difficult about that, though, is your first game with any other players, at least in my case, like I was really cagey on negotiating. Let's put it like this. You had Andy and the other familiar player that were both like, we got to get this going. It sounds like TC's perspective. It's like, we got to get this company up and off the ground. Whereas every time I had a choice, I was saying what Trent's doing, except maybe even worse, because I'd be like, if there was like nobody who was wanting to pay me anything, I'd just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna put it in the worst spot then. You know, like I'm gonna tank the company if you don't like, you know, that was kind of my thinking. I didn't say that out loud, but I was like, so who wants this? You know, I mean, because I didn't care about the company running. And so the dynamic of our game was like, you had me and one other player that were new, and we weren't really negotiating outside of just being like extremely selfish. And I think there's an element of selfless negotiation that starts to develop in John Company by people who have seen the company go pear-shaped super early in a large amount of times, especially when you know that you're playing with that Monopoly variant. I kind of think it's bizarre that Cole made that like a specific side variant that's not like what you're supposed to learn the game on, because it's like, it seems like if that's what you wanted the game to be, you would want that to be in every game, not just like, you know, if you play bad enough, you don't have to worry about learning the rules of this separate game that you'll play at the end of losing the first game.
It changes the dynamics for sure, but yeah, the other thing that's fun with negotiation is when you can kind of use it even as a weapon. Like, I think Trent did this, and I've seen other people do it. When someone has that family that you have, if you have like 2 or more cubes in the riders, that you get like $1 or $2 or something. And the director of trade is like, give me $1 or I'm promoting one of your people so you don't get your bonus.
Yeah, I did that a bunch.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. But that's like give me $1. Well, you're only gonna make $1. So if you said to me like I'm promoting your guy or give me $1, I'd be like promote my guy. Like I'm not getting $1 and giving it to you. That's like a waste.
Here's the beautiful thing about John Company in my book is that, let's say someone like Trent or someone, can like this wheel and deal and just get himself in this situation where like, oh my God, we shouldn't have done this. He's like in control of this company. The fate of this company is literally in his hands, and there's a large incentive for him to have this thing tank because he's sitting on all these victory point cubes. That's where the dice come in, and if he rolls badly and he gets kicked out, then he has to renegotiate back into that position after what we've seen him do. We're like, I don't know. And a lot of people don't like that random element of the game, and that's what I think. Like what Andy said, a lot of the complaints about the game, but to me, it just represents the unpredictable nature of the whole company venture in itself, and reinforces that, guys, we're all in the same boat together. You can be as douchey as you want to, but there's a large chance that this is going to come back and bite you in the rear end. And when it does, it's really quite something to see.
Yeah.
Well, that gives you any sort of an idea. Like Andy was really determined that we were going to get to finally play this Monopoly Revoked variant, and then the company got totally tanked, and I was like throwing fuel on the flames to get it tanked, and I won. I was like, here I was being the terrible businessman, and then I would get into a position, not really have time to make any choices that were impactful or meaningful. And then I would then retire, I would retire, and it was like the dice rolls were going for me, and then I would spend enough money. I mean, I had like an advantage on everybody else just because like all my dudes were retiring. I was like, okay, well, I've got more points than you guys. I don't want to see this Monopoly Revoke thing happen. Like, I'm gonna win.
Just remember, the point of John Company is not necessarily to run a great business. It's to get the most wealth to make your family look good.
Yeah, exactly. We tell stories about the old East India John Company before it went pear-shaped. I was
thing, and I bought like a cool top hat, and we got a condo.
Yes, you came to my royal wedding. Yes, wasn't it luscious and fantastic?
Yep, that was me. And then I was like, I had my hands in about 3 different money jars there with the ability to, I had like a few different abilities I was getting from those prizes, right? That they call them. They're called prizes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just all went for me, which was bizarre. So
and that's what makes it a fantastic game. In all honesty, I mean, I listen to a lot of heavy gamers say, I don't understand how people can like this game. I'm like, how can you not?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. It's probably my favorite game of 17 at this point.
And my biggest complaint is that it's just completely almost unavailable at this point. I'm like,
Game Surplus did all they could. By the way, time to plug our sponsor.
Time to transition.
Yeah.
Check them out, GameSurplus.com, where Carmen and Elaine are helping to bring the world of board games to you. They're actually just fantastic human beings supporting some fantastic content creators. Ourself, Longview, Low Player Count, other ones out there. I mean, there's some really good stuff out there. So you should check out GameSurplus.com if you like what you're listening to right now. Also, use that coupon code that you'll hear about later on in the podcast. I will say it right now, just in case you don't hear it there. It's Good Board Ugly Picks. And that's all of our games on our podcast picks, which I did recently update not too long ago. So you're getting some good deals. Clans of Caledonia is one that is a good deal. It is like the best price you will find for that game. And I have been looking, believe it or not, for a copy for myself so that I can give it to my little brother. And Game Surplus has the best price. So, and I'm not saying that just because I'm like, that's just in your best interest. Anyway, check them out, GameSurplus.com. Also, they're sponsored this podcast. So you can think of that however you want. You can think of it as my opinion is swayed, whatever it is. But I'm very happy with them. And,
and also, unlike my complaint at the earlier part of the live stream, they ship it in protected materials.
Oh, super good shipping. I mean, like that's what just blows my mind. Like they've got the best shipping that I've ever seen in the industry. And their prices are comparable and sometimes better. It's when it comes down to it, service, packaging, your entire purchasing experience is going to be top notch when you go with Game Surplus.
Yeah.
And so check them out.
Also, they're one of the only companies in the U.S. that will often have games that are of the ones in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, they definitely buy Sierra Madre games, and they buy Sierra Madre games when when others are looking to fire sale unload them. So they give a good home to these games that that are that have some sort of other unfortunate catastrophic event, like a shipping company that ships the games all to the wrong people.
Australia.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
We'll just
but they've helped
the
out with a few things. Yeah, no kidding. I wonder if they shipped them all to Hawaii. By the way, hopefully everybody is well in Hawaii. I don't want to just be like laughing at that, but everybody did seem to get out. So that's where all the copies of John Company went.
Yeah. Hopefully they didn't ship them like a bunch of copies of Pompeii or whatever.
Yeah. Too soon, Andy. Everybody's got out. Everybody got out. It's not like Pompeii there where you've got I'm going to put your guy in the volcano. It's not that. No. So yeah, that was our review of John Company. And now moving into a slightly different environment, one that we still got to play on the same night. I'm going to be giving you a review here of Vasco da Gama. In a nutshell, if I could go to the bottom of my roof with a copy of Vasco da Gama and heave the game back up to myself at the top of the roof, I would, to try to counteract the type of press that this game has got in the past. And what I'm referring to there is Tom Vassell threw this game off of his roof and then doubled down on it in an apology. I'm doing air quotes since you that are listening can't see me. Where he just basically doubled down and said, "I'm not actually apologizing. I stand by what I said." And I would say, I think that if Tom were to give a review of Vasco da Gama today, I think it would be a very different review. I think that Tom has gotten better about that. And I don't think that's, I think though that it's unfortunate how many people kind of all banded together to hate a game that they most likely never even played, because it became like a sort of like an us versus them, where it's almost like that sort of divisive public figure that makes you choose a side. And I don't think gamers really, I don't think even now, I think Tom, by wanting to bring everybody into the hobby, I think that even his position has changed quite a bit. But anyway, that's totally up to him and his prerogative, but I don't think that he would do that today, because it was the wrong thing to do. Vasco da Gama, if you're going to throw any game off your roof, is just a travesty that it happened. When I'm playing a game that somebody hates to that level, I'm expecting to start playing it for it to break down. Vasco da Gama is packed full of interesting, tight economic decisions and a very concerted sailing theme where you're like, there's only 4 different real places you can get actions in the game, and everything is like tied to its central. It's not just a tenuous relationship with its theme like in so many Euro games. Like this, by comparison to many other games, specifically like Stefan Feld, makes it seem almost thematic, because you're getting you're buying ships, you're manning the ships, and you're sending the ships sailing, and you've got like 4 thematic people that are helping you do those things. And it's like their role selection in that as well, but you have to sort of take that role from somebody else. It's just, to me, the playing of this game is really that sort of tense decisions where you're like, I wonder what's going to happen. There's uncertainty in this game, but it feels very manageable. And here's what I mean. So Vasco da Gama is a worker placement game with the most ingenious turn order selection I've ever seen in any worker placement game ever, because it's able to do a sort of bidding for turn order, variable placement of workers. And it does so with a very fair, you bid for the order for the pecking order position you want. But it's not just like, hey, I'm first, so I'm going to choose the 1, and then I'm going to go here because that way I get to go first. Here's how they fix that. There's a little pawn that starts in this bidding, there's 20 different little tokens that you can choose. So you can choose number 1 up to 20, right? There's each of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 20. So if I really want to go early, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to choose an earlier number. And this is always in relation to a specific pawn that's going to move, that's going to start on a specific spot. Let's say that it starts on space number 8. And then you're going to flip a tile, and that'll tell you if it moves in the positive or the negative direction. If it moves in the positive direction, that's really, really tight for the economy. If it moves in the negative direction, then that means that more players are going to get to take their actions for free. And this is why. If I take the 1, the 1 means that I'm going to get to go first no matter what. Nobody else can preempt me. And that pawn starts on the 8. Then I know for a fact, because the most that pawn can ever move is 3 to the bottom, 3 in the negative, 3 in the positive. If that pawn ends its turn in the 3 in the negative and it ends on number 5, I have to pay the difference between mine and that number. So I know this sounds like a lot of talking, but that means if I want to take that action, I got to pay $4. And this is an extremely tight economic game. If that tile flip happens and that goes all the way up to the 11, now I'm paying $10. Not $4, $10. And that's ridiculously high. Like, you would never pay $10 for any action in this game. So there's like certain actions, there's certain like pawns, certain numbers, I should say, that just like when you take them, you're like, I'm not going to be taking this action. But there is a silver lining, and that's that if you ever have an action you can't or don't want to take, you can always just take money for it. And that money depends on how late it is. The more late that it is, the better it is, because the more likely you're going to be foregoing an action to take it, as opposed to like paying $10 you don't have. So taking a tight economy, it just makes it so it's all tied to this, like, I'm bidding an 8 here. Gosh, I hope that this tile comes up. I hope I have enough money. And it's not just the game that has these teeth. It's other players. They'll see you put the 7 out, and they're like, I'm putting out the 6. Because you know what? If he has the ability to take it with the 7, I can take it with the 6. And now I'm 1 ahead of him. It's tough. It's like, you're like, how much can I possibly do it at? Okay, 6. And then Andy looks at you and says, I'm taking that with the 5. And then he does that next round. And then he does it the next round, and you're just like, fine, I give up. And then the 4th round, he doesn't even do it. Because at that point, you've just given up. You've given up on life. You're broken. You're a broken human being. And in the 5th round, you're like, okay, I got my second wind because last round I could have done it. And then he does it again. He does it again. He kills you. He steps on your throat, and he suffocates you. And just before you're about to die, he lets you have a little bit of air just so that you can try to fight back before he crushes your windpipe.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
That, my friends, is Vasco da Gama. It's a concerted, tight economic game that is focused on sailing. Like, that's what it's all about. I don't get the whole, like, what are you doing thematically? It's about sailing.
Well,
and not only that, but you just sail after they're done.
Here's what I've discovered, and I'm really excited you're excited about this one, because I have a friend who his goal is to collect every Watch Your Games game he can get his hands on. And he got a copy of Vasco da Gama. I'm like, ooh, I haven't heard about this one. And now I have, so I'm going to play it real soon. But it seems like every single Watch Your Games game I have played seems to have been a little ahead of itself. It's strange.
Yes.
Like, I remember when Nippon came out, everyone was like, boo, boo, Nippon. I'm like, what? This is fantastic.
Yeah, that game is fantastic.
It took a while for it to catch on. And the same with Zhang Wo. Man, people were down on Zhang Wo, and then I started playing. I'm like, yeah, this is great. And like by the time people discover, like, oh yeah, this is great, it's like out of print, and like the price goes, and it's like skyrockets. But it's so weird. It's like Watch Your Game. Loot Island's doing the same thing right now. I played it. I thought it was pretty good. You can get for like $14 right now, but people are just dumping it.
Well, the other one that happened was Asgard. Like Asgard, you can buy that for like $5, and then Heavy Cardboard did a live stream or a review of it or something. And then it was like, boom, price shot up fast.
That game is bananas, and it just seems to be with that company. It's like a Reef Encounter's another one. Yeah, like that. It's just like,
well, it's almost always a game that, like, here's what I would say about it. It seems to it gets players into it. By almost like, it almost attracts the wrong crowd. Maybe that's why this is happening, because like people see like a game and they're like, oh, this is a game that's about sailing. I wonder what that's like. And like you start playing it and it's like this, sailing is the central focus. But like you find amazing, deep, intense, interactive mechanisms, unlike anything else. Like for example, Reef Encounter. That's like an auction stock game, like a bit like there's no way. Like
with
my wife
shrimp.
saw that box and she's like, I want to play this. Like this looks really cool. And it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Not because of the game was bad, but just because like no interest in that style of gameplay, but the way that the game looked attracted her.
Yeah. And on our chat here, they've been Signore. That was another one I really enjoyed. That kind of fell off. We got a whole list here. I mean, it's like, it's just, it's the weirdest thing for a game. Another one, Madeira. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes.
That is like the most
Madeira,
amazingly deep dice game I have ever seen. And Good luck finding it now.
Yeah. Well, no, they're doing a reprint of a Kickstarter for Zanguo and Madeira. And they're going to be like deluxe versions, and they're nicely going to offer some upgrade kits for those that have it. So yeah, so that should be really cool.
They were designing heavy games before it was cool to design heavy games.
Yeah.
And they were designing heavy games and trying to put these heavy games into the mass market. And, like their success is finally starting to showing, because they finally have hooked a heavy game, a heavy game contingency that's kind of emerged, especially in the US, like that market has expanded largely. And I'm happy to see their success. I mean, to me, Vasco da Gama was just absolutely fantastic. I thought that I do have to say, it's not all sunshine and roses. I think that the way that the boats fill up can kind of create for, players are in control of this every step of the way, and the players have the ability to impact it, but it feels kind of like sometimes you can have some anticlimactic feeling rounds in which every good ship spot's already taken. Like, for example, if you go into the last round with only like one open spot in the most lucrative place to station your ship, then it's kind of a little bit, it can have that sort of feeling like, here we are fighting for hardly anything, and we can get all this stuff going. There still is some other points you can get, but it feels like, when you're in fourth round, when you get like 27 points for placing ships, and then your fifth round you're like, I got 3 plus the 7. It's a little bit like it can feel like the market dries up a little bit, but like maybe that just represents the saturation of the spice trade. So I mean, there's probably that sort of.
Well, you just spent too much time getting ships that needed crew, unlike me.
Andy, we didn't have to make this personal, but you went there. Yeah, Andy took the ship that automatically mans itself. Apparently, you can you can just hire a mercenary crew, and it's a special ship tile. And Andy got it every single round, every round except for the round when he didn't take it, and then it almost didn't even get taken.
4 out of 5 rounds. In the fourth round, nobody wanted it because they figured I'd go for it again.
It's just such a fascinating game. And
yeah, it's good.
The thing is, like, when I started playing this game, I thought, there must be a good reason, something here really to hate. And no, this should have been like Tom Vassell. If he disliked the game, that's okay. You can dislike a game, but he should have been like, this is a game that works. It's a game that has, it has an audience that it'll appeal to. It's really tight. He might not like tight games, but it's very tight. It's designed. You can tell there's a reason that the design works the way that it does. There's a reason that there's so many different little pieces, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of going off over each one, but just like the amount of thoughtfulness that went into this game design, and the way that it works on a slick mechanical level. The fact that it came out in 2009, only 2 years after the whole worker placement, the big fad that was Agricola. This is probably the best worker placement game that I've played that's not Agricola of that time period. It like you said, TC, super ahead of its time.
Yeah, like I said, it's just the weirdest thing with Watch Your Games, and because of that, I'm like really looking forward to. Why do you pronounce Brazil?
Yeah, it'd be Brazil if it's pronounced. If it's Portuguese. I mean, we'll just say Brazil, right? Okay. I mean, like that's the English version of it is Brazil, but yeah, Brazil.
I can say it the Texan way, Brazil.
Brazil. Yeah. Well, anything from you, Trent, on Vasco da Gama? You ever get a chance to this one back in the day?
I haven't played it.
All right. Well, here we go, guys. Moving right along into It's going to have to be you, Trent. I mean, you playing an economic game that I think I saw a tear rolling down Andy's cheek. He was happy playing John Company, but seeing this hit the table over there, I mean, it had to hurt, right, Andy? Did it hurt just a little? Please, just for me.
I don't even remember what it was. What was it they were playing?
Here, Trent, take it. Take it. Don't be like the Dutch. They're just so evil.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Tulip Bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a game published by, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Moanides Games. Moaides.
It's like, I've heard it Moa Ideas or something like that.
Yeah, Moaides.
Moai Diaz, I would think, because it's Moai statues, right? They're the Moai, and it'd be Moai Diaz.
Moai Diaz sounds good. And
like
the
more
designer
ideas, more ideas.
Yeah, the designer is Kuyu, mononym. Yes. So this is an economic game, is the way I would describe this game. It's an economic game with a little bit of action or auctioning going on at the same time, a mild set collection. But it's really an economic game because this is all about buying tulip cards. And the game itself is really simple. You have 3 rows of cards. One of the rows is the cards that are going to come into play next round. You can just see them, but you can't buy them or bid on them yet. The middle row is cards that are currently available, and then the bottom row is going to be cards that are sold this round. So here's how the game works. At the start of the game, you fill up all 3 of those rows with a certain number of cards, depending on the number of players. All of the cards in the game are these tulip cards, and they either depict a white tulip, a red tulip, or a yellow tulip. And they depict a grade, A, B, or C. And I'm leaving out a few minor details just to keep this short, but to give you the idea what's going on. There's also a table in the game that has basically indicates what the price of each type of tulip is. So at the start of the game, you randomly select white, yellow, and red. You just basically draw them out of a hat to go on 3 different columns in this table. So one of them's one of them's the most valuable, one of them's the next most valuable, one of them's the least most valuable. There are several columns in this table, and those 3 tulip types take up 3 of the middle columns in the table. And each of those columns has 3 rows that says the value of an A rose, which is the most, and a B rose, which is a little bit less, a C rose, which is a little bit less than that. So basically, throughout the game, the values of the tulips are going to go. I keep sometimes call them roses, but they're all tulips, because I don't know the difference between flower types because I'm an idiot. The value of the tulips goes up and down throughout the game, but it generally mostly goes up. Okay, it isn't straight up in a straight line. There's events that happen throughout the round that cause it to go in various directions, but it generally goes up. So you have these 3 rows of tulip cards out there, and what you're going to be trying to do throughout the game is collect sets of them, and you're also going to want to hold them and sell them after the value has gone up. So during a typical round, what happens is at the start of the game, no one has any cards in hand. So during the first round, you skip this. The first phase is there's an event card that happens that mostly generally just causes one of the tulip types to go up in value. You don't know which one, but they're roughly equal amounts of all the cards. There are also a couple crash cards in there that takes whatever tulip is the most valuable and knocks it down 2 levels. So it generally becomes either on the lower end of the value rather than higher end. So, but generally, most of the time, the value is going up. You flip over one of the event cards, that type of flower goes up. Then there's a selling phase. If you have any cards, you're going to sell them, but we don't do that the first round. So I'll get back to that. Then you do a buying phase, and everybody has 3 little tokens, and they're basically auction tokens. So you have 2 go rounds. Remember, you have 3 tokens, but there's only 2 rounds. There's the first, starting with the first player. They put a token on one of the available tulip cards that's out there. And then the second player does it, third player, and it goes from 3 to 5 players. But everybody gets a chance to put 2 of them down. If you're the only person with a token on it, you can buy that. You can then buy that card with face value. If multiple players have a token on it, there's an auction immediately, starting with the player closest to the first player, and they can bid whatever they want. But the first bid has to be above market value. Everybody that has a token on it keeps bidding until someone wins. And then that player gets it for whatever their auction is. Everybody that loses, though, gets reparations from the bank for however much that is over market value. So let's say a tulip is worth 10 at market value, and the auction causes it to go up to like 18. The losing player would get 8 coins from the bank. So there's incentive there to not let it get too high, because if it's too high, not only are you paying a ton, the other player is going to get money. But then on the other hand, you don't want to let the other player have it. It makes the auctions rather tense, which is something I really enjoyed. Okay, so you go around, you do all that, and you're collecting these cards. So what the goal with these cards is, there's 2 things you can do with them. You can either sell them at face value during the sale phase in a future round, or you can try to collect sets. There's these collectors out here that are saying, I want 3 red roses, or 3 red tulips, I mean. If you have 3 red tulips at hand, you can sell all 3 of them at once, and you get a bonus from the collector. It's a way to get extra money, and that's great. But the problem is they usually want weird sets, and other people are trying to get them too, so those are really hard to get at auction. So far it seems pretty normal, so I haven't really explained the 2 twists to it. The 2 twists that really make this game stand out for me, and they really make this very thinky. At the end of whenever you sell cards and don't sell them to a collector, you're just trying to make a profit, okay? They go down to this, they go back to the just sold row which is the bottom of the 3 rows in the market, which means that they go back in and someone else can then buy them. You can even buy them again, which is fine. What's interesting about that is, at the end of all the sale phases, the very end of a normal round, you count up all the tulip types. So you count all the yellow ones, you count all the white ones, you count all the red ones. Whichever one there's the most of goes down in value. Whichever one there's the least of goes up in value. So if you want to make a tulip price tank, you sell a bunch of them so that you're flooding the market with them. So that creates kind of like a push and pull. If you look out there at the market and you see that there's a ton of red roses out there, you know that if you buy them, it's guaranteed to go down at the end of the round. The ones that are guaranteed to go up are the ones where you don't see very many of them out there in the market. So that creates an additional incentive to decide when to sell, is to hold on to them. The second thing, and this is the thing that is the best part of the game, when you actually buy a rose or a tulip from the market, you don't have to pay the full price. You can buy them in margin. So you can pay like 1 coin, and then the bank pays for the rest, and then you put however many coin, like say it costs 10, you pay 1, and then you put 9 from the bank on it. Later on in the game, whenever you want to, whenever you can afford, whenever you want to sell that rose or that tulip, you sell it for the market value, and you just get 9 less for it. So you might pay 1, and then it goes up in value, and then you're going to get 10 back from it, which is a great profit-making thing, unless the thing tanks. So why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you do this? Well, you only have 3 buying tokens, right? If you bought one on margin and you've got the help of the bank, your bidding token stays on that card. So next round you still have 2 because you have 3 total. But if you have 2 or 3 on margin, you're not buying anything. You only have 3 cards available that you can be buying that round, and the ones on margin suck up a token. So what ends up happening over and over and over in this game is, you're like, how can I get the most possible value out of literally everything I do? Everything you do has an impact. And the thing is, it's a simple little game. You're like, it takes 30 minutes, but it's one of those where everything you do has a domino impact, and you can't quite see how it all gravitates out. The best part, this is the part that annoys people. The game ends at either 7, 8, or 9 rounds. One of the last 3 event cards is, the game is over. When it flips, the game ends. If you have any cards still in your hand, they are worthless. Tulips are now worthless. If you have any cards that are on margin, you have to pay the margin back, and then the tulip card you get then is worthless. So they're worth like negative coins. And then the person with the most money wins.
The market crashed and you didn't get out ahead of time.
Yeah, basically. Another nice, interesting feature is if someone manages to get to 120 coins, and then they're in an active buy phase and they have 120 coins on hand, they can buy a card that's sitting out there all the time called the Black Tulip, and that basically just says win the game.
Wow.
Yeah, so if things have gone that much in your favor, you can win the game, but they're generally not going to go in your favor. I love this. This is a great little economic filler. If you like games like Ponzi Scheme, it reminded me a lot of Ponzi Scheme, actually. If you like that kind of economic filler where it plays quickly, the gears are going around nice and fast, it feels like everything you do has impact, but you don't have to sit around and think forever about your turns, you like Tulip Bubble. And I've heard bad reviews about it where people are complaining about the sudden end of the game. You know this is coming, people. It's not like it's a surprise.
Yeah, it's not like we sell tulips and make a living off of it. It's called Tulip Bubble.
Yeah, and you know that one of the last 3 cards is going to be the end of the game. The only reason you wouldn't try to sell out ahead of round 7 is if you think someone else is clearly winning and you're going to try to push your luck to get ahead of them. And the other person can mess with you by holding on to a couple of tulips and then selling them to mess with the market. So I don't think it's that much of a problem. It just makes the end game feel different, is the only thing I felt about it. I really like this. I would keep playing it over and over again.
And it mimics the actual theme
Yes.
as well. I'm like, you're not supposed to be able to predict a bubble burst.
It seems like there's quite a bit of predictability, though. It's just one of those last 3 cards. Like Trent said, you know, if it's one of the last 3 cards, then if you're hanging on to your tulips, you should know that it's like a 1 in 3 chance that it's just game over right now. And that's, you know, like, the only reason you should be doing that is if you know that you're pushing it to hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I find, Trent, is with Mo Ideas, like, I feel like they're just hit streak like crazy. And maybe part of it is that I believe this is a publisher that mostly operates within Asia. And I think
it looks like Japanese or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think they're in Korea, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, I believe so.
They have a Jiraku, or however you say that.
That's the same company that did Flow History. Yeah.
And they also did Mini Rails.
Mini Rails. And it's just like some really interesting games, like exactly what you described there, Trent. Like ones where you end up spending less time playing the game than you do really thinking about what you're, you know, like thinking and seeing these decisions you've made play out. Like it's one of those fantastic little tons packed into very little. Like they're very good at getting to the core of what you're hoping for. And I think that's kind of like almost a Japanese theme. You know, you see these tiny, tiny box, like that sort of, you know, nothing more than what's absolutely needed is present in this game. And but I think that they're also sort of applying that economic type, the economic current that Andy is really a fan of. So, but they're still squarely in my realm of ones that I'm really interested in because, you know, I really do enjoy economic games, but I don't always want to dedicate, you know, like forever to like playing out and seeing how one works. So, TC, did you get a chance to see this one yet?
No, but I'm just looking at the company and seeing that they did Flow of History and Guns and Steel and then since Trent, I've been dying to play Ponzi Scheme. I want to play that game so bad. But yeah, this is definitely my radar now. This sounds really good.
Cool. All right, well, TC, you're taking over from here. And also, whenever you want to, man, go ahead and pull the trigger on moving into the topic because that's why we have this. So our topic tonight and TC's review are kind of hand in hand. I think that he sort of cooked up the idea for the topic while playing his review game.
Yeah, it was an interesting situation. But before I go into any game discussion, I just want to say off the record that if you have not seen a movie called Annihilation with Natalie Portman, you absolutely get in off your butt and see this thing. It is incredible. Okay,
I've heard really good things about it, but yeah.
So end of soapbox on movies. Because we're talking about board games. So I got a chance to play Colonial Twilight, and as everyone who listens to me knows, I am a huge fan of coin games. And Trent, have you played Colonial Twilight?
I have. Every coin game I have gotten out and at least ran through some solo rounds. So
okay,
for what you want, I have done that with that one.
Okay, so you can help me out a bit because, you know, I could talk about mechanics and talk about how, you know, the game is similar to these other coin things. I think largely that'd be a waste of time because what really got me about this one, well, first of all, it's a 2-player variant that works extremely well. I was really surprised how well this 2-player variant works for a coin game. I didn't expect it to work as well as it did. But the thing that really struck me while playing it, and what kind of is going to lead into the topic, was more than any other coin game, and maybe you can help me explain this, Trent, because we were talking about this quite a bit on the chat earlier, is that for me personally, more than any other coin game, this really drives home the idea of making ethical decisions in the space of a board game in context to its theme. And what I'm trying to get out here is, like, in Colonial Twilight, it's a game about the French Algerian War, I believe. And it's something I had like no idea about. I just saw coin volume 6. Bam, I'm getting it. We're gonna figure it out. And it goes back to the base of it being about an insurgency, which is what coin was designed to do to begin with Andy and Abyss. Whereas you have a government and you have a bunch of insurgents, and the government's like super powerful. But if you're playing the insurgency, you've got to do actions like terrorism. You've got to terrorize the population. You've got to do some pretty questionable things to get your faction going if you want to be competitive in the game. Or you can be a cartel and just be a drug dealer, but that's Andy and Abyss. But this one, I think maybe it was the fact that it was just 2 players, or maybe more so the fact that it was a conflict that, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of patriotic influence in, since I really didn't have an advancement in the French, and I didn't really know about the FLN. That when these things execute, you're like, oh my God, I am like doing these things to people. And it really struck me. And one of the mechanics that really drove that home, and this was the scenario I was playing, was I was playing the FLN, which was the insurgency, which is trying to get the French out of Algeria, if you're not familiar with this war. And one of the actions you can do, because in Coin you have your actions and in your special activities, but one of the base actions for the FLN was attack. And like any other Coin game, when you play the insurgents, you have to like expose your insurgents, roll a die, and if that die is equal to or less than the number of revealed insurgents you have, then you can attack the government or whoever else you want to attack. But in this particular game, when you do that, you can attack them, you can take out French troops and Algerian troops, but you're like, you have to like sacrifice everyone that attacks a French troop gets annihilated. It's like 1 for 1. And some of them go to casualties and some of them become available. And there was a situation where I had Algeria. It was like humongously important for the French staff because it's like a 3 population area where that was like most of their support and most of their in-game victory points. And of course, as soon as I moved in there and that flipped it to the insurgent control, he like moved all these troops in. And the way this works mechanically is that if I can get rid of French troops, much like in Fire in the Lake, you can attack the French commitment to the conflict and just whittle it down so they don't want to support it anymore. So I was sitting there with a situation was, look, I can attack. I have the initiative. I can attack these guys. And when I attack them, I'm going to bring down their commitment. But the consequences of that is I'm sending troops that I train to go basically commit suicide for the cause, right? And it was a difficult decision. I was sitting there like, oh my goodness, this is tactically the best decision I can make. But wow, just rolling this dice and, you know, after training, it for some reason, it just hit home. Maybe it was the week I was having, you know, because you do that in other Coin games. But I think that one mechanism of you just lose your troops when you successfully attack. It was that's an intentional design that the designer made to reflect that. And I was just thinking, man, it's very rare you're in a game where you're that thematically involved to make that kind of decision. Like
one of the factions in A Distant Plane, I think, has that exact same mechanism.
And that seems like almost
for similar reasons.
Yeah, like A Distant Plane, you know, the one that's set in Afghanistan, and you're talking here about, you know, like insurgency war. You know, the larger group might call that terrorism. Right?
Yeah,
where it's the 1 for 1 suicide bomber.
Yeah, it's and then there was another situation that came up before maybe we can move on to the discussion. Is that there is an event came up called torture? Okay. Yeah, if you execute this, it's like it's a dual capability. So either side can do this, and the French want to do it because they can just wipe troops off the board really easily, but it affects their commitment level. And I'm willing to let my troops go to affect that commitment level, but it's an event that you can choose to execute. It doesn't have to happen. You know,
commitment level. So just a question mechanically for this game. I'm thinking, does it connect to like the sort of funding level that you get, or is commitment level like a separate thing that you're tracking that sort of like at some point you can just, you know, your guys just won't fight for you?
It's abstracted to a large extent, but what it does is the higher this commitment level is, or maybe so lower, it affects the funding that the insurgents get. It affects the overall commitment level the French has. And if you can knock that thing in a certain direction, I can get like a whole bunch of resources as the insurgents, and it's going to affect their commitment level. And their commitment level is one of their victory conditions. They have to obtain like up to 35 commitment and support. So it's basically, it's a lot like Fire in the Lake, where it's an abstract level that of how much the French government is supporting this activity in Algeria. Does that make any sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I was just wondering, like, does it mean that your troops now dislike you? And it sounds to me like it's more connected to, like, it makes you look bad in France.
Yeah, it's like the French government supporting the government activity in there, and it just makes it, you don't get that much fun resources to spend on things you want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was there something in there that you were going to say, Trent?
Sorry.
No, the only thing I mentioned is that the suicide bomber mechanism was also in A Distant Plane.
Separately.
That was all I said.
Yeah. And I think this is from the same designer, right?
Yes.
So he's like taking these hot topic issues. Like in the case of A Distant Plane, that almost seems to me like that would be the one with the most ethical. Trent, I think you've mentioned that like it hit too close to home for you.
It did. I had a friend that served 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, I believe 3. And there were aspects of A Distant Plane I played shortly after he got home for the last time. And there were aspects of A Distant Plane that I felt really hit close to home. It was like, it was not hard for me to visualize my friend dealing with these things. Like, legitimately his life on the line with them. And I was like, that was, I mean, this is an intense topic to deal with even in a distant historical thing, but that is like current.
It's right now.
Yeah.
Well, and I've read or heard of people that have similar issues with playing Labyrinth, the War on Terror, even though like it's somewhat similar to Twilight Struggle in a lot of ways, but that's kind of far back enough that most people aren't bothered by it. While I've known people who played Labyrinth that were like, I can't keep going with this. Like it just legitimately bothered them.
And if Labyrinth began to feel dated, they made an expansion to make sure it was nice and up to date.
Yeah, the expansion that's like 2010 to the present. Like,
they had like the Arab Spring, basically.
Yeah, the Arab Spring in it and stuff, Yeah, and this whole thing puts me in a really interesting position because here I am. I really like my play of Colonial Twilight. I would say is by far one of the best coin games I've played. I mean, 2-player, it's really streamlined. Everything's really straightforward, and you're simply dealing with 2 people. You can get moving on it. But I also have a problem recommending it because of the subject matter in it, and so it's like it's this weird.
What's interesting to me about that, TC, is that like this is something that's fairly disconnected from like you weren't very familiar with the topic as right, and but yet it's troubling. Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing, and the only thing I can attest to that is since I wasn't familiar with the conquest, you can play like the American Revolution. You're like, yeah, this happened, that George Washington did all that stuff. But once you like remove a connection like that, and you're just seeing what this conflict was kind of objectively and what both sides are doing, and you're relating more to like the people involved with it instead of like the government or the factions or anything. And then, the cards themselves, the event cards they're very straightforward. They don't have any type of revolution jargon on it or nationalistic pride, like Viva la France and all that stuff. They're really stripped down to that, just saying what it is. And if you look into like what the card represents in the rule book and like the event describes, it's really frank. It's like, this is what happened. And we kind of touched on this the last episode we had a bit,
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit on it, but this is a much more like this is the time for it, TC. Yeah. And I think that go ahead, Andy.
I was just gonna say the thing that I think it's worth bringing up here is I think kind of these ideas about sort of whether a game will affect you ethically or morally or whatever. Depending on the type of game, that's going to be a very different experience, because I would argue that historical war games like this should make you feel something. I mean, they're there to, as much as they are a game, they're there to kind of teach you ideas about what was going on and why as well. And I think that's some people, when they look at people playing war games, they're like, well, how can you play the Nazis? I mean, that's and you're like, no, I'm learning by doing this, a point of view or an idea or something like that.
But it's but the game is never asking you to be like on the side of Nazi propaganda. It's like you're a soldier, and really like what it does is it sort of strips down the conflict to being like one force pitted against another force. And the only real thematic, like, you know, the real, you're the Nazis in so much as you are playing where the Nazis were, using the machinery and you know, the forces that the Nazis had access to. But it's not like you're sitting there also playing the German political system, you know, like, and trying to, like, you know, push forward propaganda, trying to keep Hitler from, you know, like there's not a game that's really done that aspect of, like, you know, like navigating the, you know, the passage of the final solution. And that's like, there's a reason that hasn't been touched on, you know, like clearly.
I think you would get into, I think you could potentially make a game about that, but it would have to be about another 100, 200 years in the future. You could get away with it.
I don't even know about that, man.
There's definitely a too near thing.
Okay,
like,
well, no, I think there's a difference between too near and just too heinous. Because here's what I would say. Like, what about, you know, let's talk about genocides that happened in Roman times. And if you're really interested, I know that other listeners of this podcast have been turned on to Dan Carlin's Hardcore Histories. You should listen to the one that's about, like, the Celtic Holocaust. Because
I mean, that's essentially what Falling Sky is recreating. I mean, one of your thing is the Romans there, when you it's not devastate, but there's an action they can take that's like basically scatter the tribes, burn their houses, steal their stuff, kill lots of people. I mean, that's in there.
Okay. Yeah, there's a similar mechanic that in Colonial Twilight where you can resettle and like bring the population down to 0. I mean, you know, there's some pretty. I mean, Trent brought it up that I'd never really realized this, but he probably was like, coin games are almost entirely about ethical decisions you have to make during the games.
Where Celtic people escape. I mean, I guess because we're making a comparison here, you know, like clearly we're never going to say that about World War II and that situation, but they were a scapegoat people, but the Celtic people were like, you know, they were subjects that were rebelling against. That wasn't the case. Like, you know, I don't think there's going to be, like, I don't know, like an extermination game. I guess it'd be interesting to see if there was like an extermination game about like getting, like, wiping a certain animal off the face of the earth just because you don't like it.
That one person kind of did that, but it was never intended for a mass market situation. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. But she made it as more of an art project, and it's a logistics game. And she does it as a demonstration thing for kind of this art, emotions, ethnicity stuff that she does. But basically, it's just the game is called Train, and it's about moving X number of people the most efficient way down the train. So you win by doing that. So you play this game for like 30 minutes to an hour of trying to like optimize how many people you can get on the train from point A to point B.
Is it a video game or a board game?
No, this was a very basic board game that she created.
Okay, yeah.
And then basically the reveal is after you've spent, you know, 30 minutes to an hour of optimizing these routes, she reveals that
concentration camps.
Yeah, you were sending all of these people to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
But the specific point of that game is to teach you, one, to see how it makes you feel, and two, it's meant to prove the point that in the I guess quote unquote right decision, people can do things that they normally wouldn't do.
Here's what I would say, man. Like,
system.
I would think that, like, you know, the person that decided where the people would go to Auschwitz was able to make that efficient decision. You know, like, kind of there was a level of disconnect between what was actually happening, right? And that's, I think, you know, how such a tragedy like the Holocaust, you know, like was pervaded by an entire group of people, many of which, you know, it was that sort of, it started as a scapegoat and then it just worked into, like, you know, being killed.
It also is, it's an authority figure thing. There was an experiment done in the U.S. shortly after World War II. addressing that same question is how can you get good people to do horrible things? And what they did was they set up this room where you would bring in random volunteers. And the people were told that randomly one of you is going to be attached to a chair that shocks you, and one of you is going to be asking questions. In reality, everyone who was selected was going to be question askers. So they would go into a room. Through a pane of glass would be a person attached to an electric chair. And then they tell you every time they get a question wrong, you have to shock them. And the voltage will increase with every wrong answer that they give. Like we're studying a classical conditioning situation. What they didn't know is there was no electric chair.
Just actors.
It was an actor. And what they would do is the actors were told after a brief time, purposely start getting the questions wrong. And they would increase the voltage. And most people at a certain point would look at the person, go, do I continue? And the person that was doing it was just told to say, yes, you must complete the study. That's all they said. And they found that, and these were randomly selected U.S. citizens, that it was something like 60 to 70% of people would continue shocking them.
Yeah.
Even to the point that the person had been screaming they have a heart condition, and like they had faced passing out, like they might have flatlined, and most people would continue shocking them. It was just the presence of an authority figure telling you what to do was enough to make you do it.
Yeah.
But I think, part of my point, I think, was that if you have these themes in a historical game context where it's obviously that part of this is to educate you as well as to be a game experience, you can kind of get away with it. But if you transfer this theme to a different game where it's not put in with the same, I think, thoughtful approach that I believe most war gamers tend to do, that's where you get the major pushback. So my example for that would be moving it to the condition of slavery. You take a game like Freedom, where most people respect that game, and I don't think anyone plays that like to be happy-go-lucky about it. I mean, it's definitely kind of a solemn or learning about the experience affair for most people who play that.
Yeah, it's very intense.
Yeah, most people are fine with that game. And then you take slaves and throw them in as like a marketable resource in 5 tribes, and everybody loses it.
Yeah, or like Endeavor, in which the thing is, like in 5 tribes, you're using these cards. So there's just like, you just use it, you just earn a card, and then you use a card as like a worker, and it's got a picture of a slave on it, and it's troubling, but it's like it's kind of minor, right? It's not like you're like pervading slavery, or that you're part of holding up the institution of slavery. It's more like you're not a decision maker inside this institution. That decision was made by in this case the game designer in relation in response to the content matter. A game like
that's what I'm kind of saying though, is it was put as almost as a flippant thing, and I think that's what angers some people in these situations.
That it was just like are you just going to throw this in here and not actually deal with it? The thing is though, what about Endeavor? Because Endeavor's a really good game that was brought up here, and the thing is, like, if you choose to use slavery in Endeavor, you will have a vested interest in keeping it from being abolished. Is that ethically a troubling position to be working within? Is that, and here's what I think maybe I don't want to come off here as insensitive when I say this, but there is a social contract that you enter into when you're playing a game. And whenever somebody makes an ethical decision about what they will or won't do in the confines of a board game or a tabletop experience, where they are going to not utilize a certain aspect of the game because of the way that they feel, I think that at some level sort of corrupts the experience with that game. Now, I'm not saying that, like go out there and play every game and play every part of every game, even if it's something that you disagree with morally. I'm saying that, like, part of that social contract is that kind of like, we're here playing a game. Now, that's not what we're always doing, though. A lot of times we're learning about a specific, we're being exposed to much more in games now than just the gameplay. We're not just looking at abstracted war, like abstracted war, like in, for example, chess, an abstract version of war. We're not looking at just beads on a giant, grid. It's, games have become a lot more connected to the human experience and capable of conveying a story, of conveying a message, of conveying a thesis. Now, like history-wise, revisionist history is as dangerous or more dangerous than telling the facts as they are. Like it's dangerous to look at like revisionist history. Now, it depends on where you're coming at it from, though, because like looking at trying to use history to say like, well, for example, the people that have said like, oh, look at how much better the life is for the people that are former slaves because they live in the United States. It was a favor for them. That is absolutely ridiculous to even just think that like taking somebody from their homes and taking away their free will, and then eventually, even though they were fought against in getting their freedom, eventually they ended up in this situation that you're saying like, oh, point at that, look at that, that's favorable. No, the whole idea of the process was to keep them subjugated. That's ridiculous. And so the thing is, like, if a game is being revisionist, if it's being or if it's dealing with its content matter in a way that's not like actually looking to tell you different aspects of a story and just doing it in kind of like a oh, hey, this is a part of the time, so we're going to have that in the game. That's where it gets a little bit like, it's kind of up to the designer. And, if a designer puts something in a game that upsets people or that makes them feel, like, and this is, I'm going back to, like, I feel like so often it's like, if people are going to buy it, whatever, and I feel like that's a capitalist argument, because not every game deserves to be put into a box and shipped, even if people will buy it, right? Not every game does. Not every thought that's written on the internet deserves to be said through a loudspeaker, blasted out. Like there are some very dangerous beliefs that people can hold. And there's some creeps and weirdos out there. And even within our hobby, there are people that are like that. Andy.
But a point to make up with this is.
Oh, Andy, you go. I didn't mean to say that you were a creep or a weirdo. I'm sorry. That was totally inadvertent, dude. I apologize.
I'm a weirdo, but
we do that.
It's in a different way, so it's fine.
Well, I'm going to interject here a little bit.
Yeah.
It's really funny because when we were playing Colonial Twilight and we were going, oh, these are like really harsh decisions to make. Like literally across the room, there was a group of people playing Decipher, right? And I think these type of things largely depend on the group of people you want to play with.
Yeah, that's
because there are people who wouldn't come within 10 miles of a game like we were playing just because of the subject matter, primarily because they're playing a game for entertainment and escapism. They don't want to be reminded of these things, right? So, for me personally, a large way to do this, just figure out the game group you want to. I mean, I will rave about Colonial Twilight as a great game, but I would be very, very careful who I play it with, Yeah.
Well, this is like, I was talking to my wife about this topic beforehand because the way I approach entertainment and what I do is very different from her. Like, my wife is a very, very staunch pacifist. And very like,
well, she loves war, or she loves chess, and that's an abstracted war.
Yeah, wow. That's crap. If anyone tells you that, anyway. But yeah, but for example, like putting it into the world of video games, and board games kind of follow like this with her as well. She has a problem with, doing the act of violence. Like for her is almost like condoning it, which goes against her core beliefs as a pacifist. So for her, like, it's very difficult and very upsetting. So if I want to even play like a first person shooter game, I leave the room because for me, it's not a problem. It's escapism. Like I don't see, to me, watching a war movie and playing a first person shooter video game is the same thing. For her, it isn't. And you have to deal with that, I think, and recognize where your buttons are. So like, you know, for example, if I'm going to play the game in Infamous Traffic, I'm upfront about it. I'm like, this is a game about opium dealing. It's a dark theme. It's very, very vicious. If you like that kind of thing, hey, feel free to play. If it's going to bother you, you should maybe look for another game.
But I still want to play it.
Yeah. I still want to play it. But I mean, this is me. I'm a different person. I am like extremely good at compartmentalizing my behaviors and thoughts.
Yeah, and people have their own comfort zones with just about anything, you know.
Right. Like for me, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, there's been many video games I've played that have taught me I should never be a supreme being or have unlimited power.
I was wondering how long it'd take you to bring this up.
No, well, like the best example was if you ever played an old game called Black and White. Black and White was about you being a god, which ticked off a lot of people. And so like a perfect example of how I played this game was in like the second island, they finally teach you about human sacrifice. And they have like this mother and father. They're like, please take our boy. And like the game makes you sacrifice the kid. So I sacrificed the kid. I'm like, oh, that gives you energy. And then I threw in the mother and father immediately. Like, you're bad parents. You're going to get sacrificed too. And then I did things like I learned in this game that you can sacrifice dead bodies for a little bit of energy. So I forced my civilization to stop building graveyards. Like just horrible things. Now, would I ever do something like that in real life? No. Like, you know, when I played The Sims, like I lured a guy into my house and kept him locked in this attic until he died. Not something I'm going to do in real life. When I play war games or stuff like that, same thing. For me, it's a different effect. And some of those, what would bother me or not, kind of goes somewhere else. And so for me, it's not a big deal. For my wife, it is. And so knowing that that's a fundamental part of her personality, like even though, I mean, Colonial Twilight would be a great 2-player experience, that I am never going to try to get my wife to play that. There's just no way. It would be very upsetting to her, and I don't want to do that.
Well, I think what's really interesting here is that we are, you know, this was sparked by TC's review of Colonial Twilight, which is something that isn't like personally, you know, none of us have a personal connection, at least none that we've voiced to this point, with that specific conflict. You know, it's just the idea of the fact that you were connecting with these pieces and seeing them as your own sort of pieces, and it was like you were having to make a decision that they were expendable. And so like it's an like seeing humans as a resource, right? I mean, in the game of Village, it's like, you know, you can affect the passage of time so that people die at certain times. But the difference is that, like, you know, you're talking about kind of like a whole group. Like, if you were to make a game that was about, you know, like, let's say, you know, killing people and doing it most efficiently, if you did that on, you know, and in the, you know, in the context of a war, that's fine. If you do it in the context of a civilian situation, that's a genocide simulator. Like, that's, you know, and that's something that nobody's going to want to play, right? No matter how compartmentalized your entertainment is in your own head, nobody's going to be okay with like genocide simulator outside of like maybe a far right interest group, or I don't even say like I don't know, just like people who believe that, you know, that racial purity is, you know, like there are people that hold these types of beliefs, and they probably, these types of things I just talked about probably exist to some level at somewhere, you know, at some level.
Here's the other thing is, once again, let's think about purpose here. Not saying genocide, but let's say somebody created a game about school shootings, which is a very bad topic right now. But here's the thing.
Somebody did, dude. This was on Steam, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, they pulled that off. Yeah,
I was
they
talking
pulled that
about
game off.
board games.
Like Super Columbine RPG or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, but let's say a board game or something like that. Now, if I were to do that, what would be my purpose? If my purpose is to sell that to the mass audience, yeah, there might be something wrong with me. But however, if I created a game like that with the purpose of simulating the situation to do training with educators and security personnel, there might be a valid reason to do that.
I guess it depends on what perspective you're taking. Like, you know, so I mean, yes, it's the treatment of the topic together with the topic itself. So I mean, that, you know, you can't take one without the other, and
Right.
you know, try to see one in a vacuum. Like, for example, you know, to be, maybe you've got a genocide simulator, but you work as like a member of the resistance, right? And so, and this is kind of like even playing, you know, like you mentioned Freedom the Underground Railroad. That one troubles me from a, you know, an ethical standpoint, but it's educational, and I do feel like it was troubling for a reason, because if you know how to successfully play Freedom the Underground Railroad, it's not just about saving every last person.
Oh yeah, you
like,
can't do it. In
game,
fact,
it's about strategically positioning slaves so that you can raise money, because you need that money to further your cause and save as many as you can. Like the big losing condition is if you have too many slaves get taken. So I mean, like, you know, that's, I think people really connect with that. The game wants you to free people, but the game also, like, the big part of the game, like the next level where it really gets to that next level of strategy, is by forcing you into risky situations with placing lots of slaves in specific cities, so you can play an action that's like a fundraising action that gets you enough money to be able to the game forces you to just get arbitrary amounts of money so you can further the time frame. And if you don't do this, you will just lose straight up. You will not have advanced into later game. Like, literally, time will stop and you will lose the game. Right.
So I think, you know, when I think about things like this is, I agree. I think it's a lot to do with what is the purpose, what is the context, what is the goal. So
even then, though, Andy, if I have Genocide Simulator where I'm playing as a resistance player and I have another player that's playing as genicist. I mean, this sounds so awful. Whatever it is, like genocidal maniac.
I think, Joe, you're going to like an extreme. You know?
I am, because that's the thing, though. Like, but like that's the question here, and I'm not mentioning a specific situation because I don't want to talk about a group. That would be, to me, that would be wrong. But like,
yeah, yes, one to consider though. Like when I was a kid, this has been high school, right? It wasn't a great game by modern game designs, but we played it occasionally when we weren't playing RPGs. Was a game called Nuclear Proliferation. And the goal was genocide. Like, I mean, of the human race. So
you mean you like wiping it out, like just
right. So like, if you took me out of the game, I had like quote unquote the final option, which was mean I could launch all of my nukes. I had the ability to launch back at you and wipe you out. Like, there could literally be no winner in the game because it was just a chain reaction of everyone wiping each other out. So the goal was trying to get as much population as you could, knowing you were going to try to wipe out your enemy in the process. But there are things like that. But I really think that it does depend on the context and the person. So there would be a lot of things that wouldn't bother me as much if I'm treating it respectfully. And I think, you know, for example, in the wargaming crowd, there's a lot of things that people would like, why would you want to do that and stuff? But I think by and large, most people I've seen as wargamers, they treat the content and concepts they're dealing with very respectfully. You know, another example might be...
But they still have a perspective, Andy. They always do have a perspective, and sometimes that perspective itself is, you know, is based on a few presuppositions, maybe, you know, like a certain reading of history.
Well, yeah, to err. I mean, to be human is to err, but I think there's... you can do your due diligence. So, for example... I can't remember the guy who designed Navajo Wars and Comanche.
Yeah, he actually communicated with
Toppin. Yeah, and in fact, he said the reason he made Navajo Wars a solitaire game is he didn't want another person to play that faction. He wanted him to empathize with the Native Americans. It was a really interesting design choice that resulted in a really cool solo engine on that thing.
Yeah, but I mean, there's very much a story to tell there, but I think that's treated with respect and seriousness. He did his due diligence of taking it to members of tribes and stuff and having them look at it.
But he still, Andy, though, doesn't have a player that's playing the oppressor in that one. And I think
not in that one, because that's not the goal. The goal
not in Command Sharia either, though. But the thing is, though, the goal was to simulate this conflict, but he did so by making the oppressor, or like the encroaching European descendant, whatever, white man, whatever. Like, he made them programmed. He did not make them something a player would have to play as. And I think that part of that is like, when you're that connected to that community and you're that like you really know that much about what's going on, you know that they're not going to want anybody anywhere to be playing a game where they're going to benefit from wiping you off the face of the earth or from subjugating your tribe and completing their victory conditions in the process. That's what that bot's trying to do to you, though.
Oh, right. But yeah, and like I said, and I think it's like, I don't know, for me it's just going to be about different people and whatnot. And I mean, if we're going to really say we live in a free market here, then you really can't prevent anybody from trying to make a game. You can say that's a really bad idea and I don't have to buy it. I mean,
I'm in the affected group here. Like,
right?
This is not how I would like to be represented.
Right, you get your say.
But when the majority is the one that's buying it, and your voice is a maybe a loud voice, but a very small group is saying this. I mean, we could make games about anything, and then just the only time that anybody gets upset is when they would just get ignored. When somebody gets upset, they just be like, you're not big enough to matter.
I don't think most people act like that, though. Like, for the most part, I think when people are upset by something, like, most decent human beings can see a reason behind that, I feel. With the modern weird social media world, I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax that can get into that. But I, for the most part, like, I don't find most people do that. Like, if people are going to get bent out of shape of the idea of playing a slave card in 5 tribes, I have a feeling that if you did one that glorified slavery as a positive aspect, then there might be a lot of people who'd be like, yeah, you really shouldn't be doing this. Like, there would be some outrage by it.
Yeah. What do you think about This Guilty Land, though? Is the saving grace? So This Guilty Land is a game coming out from Holland Spiel in which one player, at least one player, is going to play as the institution of slavery, essentially.
Right.
The people whose interests were to keep slavery legal. And the thing is, like, is the saving grace of Holland Spiel in this case, and maybe in the past as well, the fact that it's not going to reach a wide enough audience for it to be worth anybody that plays this and is in an affected group, that's in, like, where they're descended from people who were enslaved.
Well, I don't know. Like, the thing is I know so little about the game, I'm not going to judge it harshly until I know how the mechanisms work a little bit more. But I think, A, that's part of it, and B, the kind of people that are going to really look at a Hollenspiel game anyway are kind of there expecting some oddities and some things that are different. And
that sounds like something that you would say about your racist grandpa.
Yeah, but I want to side with Andy a little bit on this one, because Trent, maybe it was just me it took 7 volumes for me to realize that coin was doing this. Maybe I'm just way behind on the game here, because apparently Trent was like, he nailed it right off, saying TC, that's always been there. I'm like,
I was gonna say, yeah, a distant plane. I knew a distant plane would have that at a different level than this, dude. It's like
I've played a distant plane once, right? And so I was like,
so you're like sort of like saying I was just being a snowflake, guys. Never mind.
But GMT games, it's interesting because generally we play very specialized niche games, right? I mean, we say GMT, like, most of the people who know what board games are like, what? Hollenspiel, what? The most of the people who play board games play it for entertainment purposes and things like that. So we're a very select group.
We don't play them for entertainment individuals. We've transcended the entertainment.
who like to expand, who like to experience things differently than most people do. Okay, I like one of my favorite things to say is like, okay, guys, board game geek is not everything. It's just a very specialized people who play board games a lot. That doesn't represent the vast majority of people who do. But so. When you make a game like this type, we're talking about these type of things, and they come from a specialized company like GMT or Hollandspiel, you're automatically like narrowing who's going to play this to begin with, and you're marketing it to a very specific audience. I think. Am I on to anything with this?
I agree. I still think that just like any history book, there's going to be, there's the potential, depending on how it's, like Andy said, treatment is a big factor. Yeah. And when you look now on historical text from 100 years ago or 150 years ago, what was being said about slavery, and what's said up to now, like these topics, there's a lot of different historical texts that are being viewed as being super biased and, looking to, like they sort of have a shadow cast on them. And I think that's potential, just like with any other form of media, like, the movies as well, like one of the first movies, like was Birth of the Nation or whatever. There's so many like you can even though that film could have been considered great in its time, and I don't know that it was, but like when you look back on it, it's like this is propaganda, or this person's perspective was like, were they actually indicative of this, or were they making a whole bunch of allowances and ignorant of a larger societal problem?
Well, here's the thing I think of with this, though. I get your argument, I do, but at some point it's like, okay, so we should never make anything because it's always.
That's interesting. I was going to try to take this too far too. You want to hear me take it too far, Andy? Okay, so people are protected groups, and most of the connections that I've made has been people, right? Man. But if I said that like, this game's all about genocide, you go, oh, that's the extreme, Joe. No, I'm talking about Plague Inc. It's a game that's about genocide.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, the thing is, like, it's about taking out the entire human race. But like that's one end of it, right? It's like it's fine because it's not targeting any specific people. It doesn't mimic anything in real life. It's just like you're playing. Like people can accept that the role of a virus is not one to make decisions about who they're killing. It's about killing everybody, right? And that's why it's okay, because it's like we're all being. It's like there's a certain equality in the treatment that Plague Inc. takes. Now let's take this. Go ahead.
I'm going to throw out a video game.
Trent, I think I'm kind of missing some things. I just heard I'm ready to throw out a video game, and then the rest of it didn't come through.
Okay, so I enjoy playing like long Civilization-style computer games.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And one of my favorites that I've ever played is Alpha Centauri, which is an older one that was.
It's like this Sid Meier's set in space, right? Civ set in space.
It's Civ set in space. In that game, you have a choice of 7 factions. One of the ways in which they maintain popularity with their own people is by nerve stapling their own citizens. Huh. That's how you win with that faction.
Like just like neutering their ability to
you send in troops, and basically like the technology is you literally put a staple on the back of their neck and.
Oh, there's ones in like Galactic Civilization games. That Stardock did, similar ones. There's one race I played once that basically power all their machines by like ripping the soul energy out of living beings.
Well, here's taking it even another step further, guys. Like you can look at the games I play and say that I'm a Eurogame or whatever. I'm about taking the forest. Like in my game of Glass Road, I start with six blocks of forest, and unless I have a very specific setup that wants me to keep these forests there, I'm going to chop those babies down. I'm going to get wood for it. Hopefully in the process, I'm clearing space. I'm going to use that space. It's like I am playing a consumer-based game. What if in the future, like bear with me here and go ahead and call me whatever names you want to, because I'm using this as a hypothetical. This is hypothetically here. But the court case has been presented recently. What if in the future the Earth is protected under like as a citizen? The Earth is considered a citizen. And so anything that you do that is not keeping the Earth's interest in mind as well, and keeping like sort of conservationist focused things, like chopping down, like, just like making humans seem like that sort of, the once-alers from the Lorax. like any of that. Now, all of a sudden, all these games that I play and that I love now become consumerist propaganda, where it's like just pervading the idea that human beings' job is to go in, exploit, and then move on.
Well, I think you just described a very interesting sequel to Fahrenheit 451.
But I mean, that's okay. I guess to look at that, I get where you're going with that, but that's the problem I have with a lot of people that take works that are old out of context. So if you pull things that are written from the past into the modern world and expect them to adhere to modern values and then get offended when they don't, that's kind of on you, I think. Like, you have to understand the time period and the context of which they are done. And so, I mean, that's an issue. Like, there's a series of sci-fi novels I've read that were written in like the 30s. And even the strong female characters, which they were for that time, are still like, oh, save me. And like, you know,
in distress, yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, you've got to understand the context to which they have been written. And ultimately, if reading something or doing something with that bothers you, then don't do it. Like, there's nothing saying you have to deal with this. And I think as an individual, it depends what you're trying to get out of it. So, like, if we're talking This Guilty Land, like somebody, you know, well, would you play the people basically promoting slavery? Probably wouldn't have a problem with it. However, when I'm playing that game, I'm going to be also looking at what were those decisions? What motivated these people to do that? Like, I'm going to
depends on how close to home it hits, because in TC's example,
I was about to say, it's weird if everything in context, because like in my example, I was just connecting to it because I was training people in my bases and putting them out and asking them to basically kill themselves, you know.
And if that bothers you, like, then you don't play the game.
I know. It's just, you know, it's like, wow, this is a hard ethical choice here. And I like that kind of stuff, you know. It's just, but again, that comes to me like, now I gotta think, now that I'm seeing this, I'm like, that's gonna be a hard recommendation right here, guys.
Right.
And I think for the big thing I have to say is, I think that the need for the ethical discussion exists. The ethical acknowledgement, the ethical discussion exists. But to use your actual gameplay play style as your voice towards how you're expressing your beliefs and values and opinions, you know, like, that to me is in essence, you know, like, you're the one who draws up the social contract for your game table. But at my game table, I would expect that social contract to include, like, hey, we're just playing a game here.
Right.
Yeah. Like, and that's more where I'm going. Like I want you guys to know, I'm not here telling you, like, this is what I think. I'm trying to take this to its illogical, irrational conclusion, and then say, that's why I think, you know, the discussion should exist there, but that should be at a different plane than the actual gameplay. And if it's a game where it has troubling actions that are, like, to the point where it's not going to be possible to set that ethical discussion aside, and you must communicate using the game, then I think that's where it becomes, you know, like, problematic. And that's where a designer starts to dig themselves a hole, you know, and they make a game that can't be enjoyed because people are too busy getting caught up in the discussion of the ethical debate. So should the ethical debate take place? Yes, if that's the goal of the designer, but it needs to take place in an environment where it can really be enjoyed. Like, for example, you talking to yourself in Navajo Wars because you don't have anybody else there.
Right. Or like I said, if you had two people, you know, even in This Guilty Land, who were sitting down to play it and wanting to learn from it as well, that's not a problem. I think where you get into trouble is if you have a game that you know is going to have some ethically complex decisions that could cause trouble, and you're not upfront with the people you're about to play with about that, or you don't know that. I guess what I'm saying, these games are going to be more of a problem if you take them to a large group meeting where you don't know everybody. And And I think in those cases, you better be dang well upfront about what that's going to involve.
Yeah. And I would just like to argue the fact that, when, I was playing Colonial Twilight and my guy's playing with the torture thing. And that was, I didn't in any way interpret that as something regarding his character, right? As a person. I understood that was a mechanic in the game that he employed to get to that 35 victory point goal he needed to get. But what was interesting about it is that afterwards it did spark a very interesting conversation about how that worked in the game and how it reflected and how that was really wrong, but it was interesting in that context of the theme and the history of the game. And I think these are really important discussions to have, in that if you're with the right group of people playing these type of games, and like Andy says, you're upfront about it, you can have some very enlightening dialogue with people about what was happening within the context of the game. Now, if you're playing with someone who is like, you did it intentionally because that's the type of person you are, then you don't need to be playing with that person. Okay? Because they're like, you're like making all kinds of judgments against me, and you don't even know who I am. So yeah, I'm gonna pack this game up, and I never want to see you again. Go back to play Secret Hitler or whatever you like, whatever. But
this makes me never want. Yeah, we shouldn't play games together again. I've had that said to me before. Yeah, so
but having type of ethical decisions within the game and the context of the game and the setting of it, I drove him home that Wednesday night, and we talked a lot about this game, and to me,
that's really beautiful.
That was a very good thing to come out of it. Very cool.
Well, yeah, and what I was questioning there, TC, was more like you kind of hesitated a bit in your recommendation for it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think, it sounds like the discussion you had was a very relevant kind of it put you there, which speaks to the qualities the game had. I would say that imagine playing any of these games in front of, like Joel Toppin did for Navajo Wars and Comancheria, in front of and with people in the affected groups.
Yeah.
And if that's something that makes you feel awkward, then, it's the designer that's putting that out, but even if there's not somebody in the affected group there, you should play as though they were.
Yeah.
And if it's not possible to do that, or if you find yourself a lot of times there's covert racism, where it's like, okay, we got a room full of people that aren't in this affected group, so I can actually say this. And that right there is the definition of covert racism. So I haven't heard from Trent in a while. Trent, are you following what
Trent's just amazed that it took me that long to realize this about coin games. Right, Trent?
Yes. Here's my general thought is this. Any war game that goes beyond just the pew-pew dudes on a map is going to come into these issues, because generally it's these type of deep human issues that causes humans to have war in the first place. And when you deal with those in any sort of depth beyond Risk or Axis and Allies, you're going to have to start rubbing up against these issues. I think it's prevalent in the war game genre.
Yeah, like you said, Fortress America is kind of like the most xenophobic game of all time, just by concept. A game in which the United States is fighting off essentially everybody that's different colored, And
it's amazing in its design. But that's what it is. I think it's hard to design a war game that, with, like I said, with any depth more than Axis and Allies, that doesn't come into these ethical issues.
And it's interesting. When it comes down to it, I just want to preface one other thing. I don't think that designers that have designed a game that has made you ask ethical questions, or that you question, whether or not a specific player should be allowed to take a certain action because of what the ethical implications of that action are. I'm not saying throw the designer under the bus, because they're human just like anybody else. The same way that if somebody has done something in a game that rubs you the wrong way, talk about it with them. They're human beings, and you know what they're capable of doing? Changing, just like you are if you need to.
Right.
I guess the old red-green, I'm a man. I can change.
And I guess, the last point, I think I'll make too on it is just that I think one of the problems I have sometimes with topics or ideas is the idea of, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. because I think that's a danger in the sense of if you don't engage with subjects, even if they make you uncomfortable, it kind of maybe falls into the level of is history doomed to repeat itself because we refuse to talk about the truly difficult things. And maybe a board game is a way I can understand that better than other ways or not. But if we don't talk about it and let's pretend like it never existed because it might offend somebody, that's a danger too. Like,
I agree, yeah, but like you said, Andy, it's about the treatment.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. Take it seriously.
Is a better way. Like I agree with we should not talk about this because that's wrong. That's like like trying to erase spaces from a history book dooms you to repeat it. I think you're absolutely right, but we should not talk about this lightly.
Oh, absolutely.
Is what I would add. Like this should be something that we like the game is here to bring that discussion about.
Right, and that's what I said. I think. And to look at what the designer is trying to do with the game, I think most like GMT folks, they're trying to educate as much as they are trying to get a gameplay. If you're wanting to have a game that has mass market appeal, then you probably want to follow one of the best stay neutral in politics examples I've ever heard of. Because so many people run their mouths off about their politics. They're like, well, why are you buying from my business now? Because you opened your mouth.
Also, the fact that in a typical GMT game, they will have like half a book in itself in the game is references and designer notes, and they go out of their way.
But see, if you want to have mass market appeal, this is what you do. Somebody asked Colonel Sanders once, the KFC guy, what he thought about hippies, at the time. And his response was, do they eat chicken? They eat chicken. I don't care, man.
Yeah, exactly. A customer is a customer, and that's why, like it really blows my mind when I see a stance being taken by somebody. Why would you ever want less business? Why would you ever want to restrict your audience in any way?
Well, especially if you're going for mass market appeal. Like if your idea is, hey, let's make code names the Holocaust, that's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
This is not what you should be doing.
But here's the other thing, Andy. Like what happens though in a game that is specifically targeted to divide people? Because that can become for example, like
Cards Against Humanity
is basically that. Yeah, it's a game that's like we're going to divide people. We're going to divide people into people who get offended and then people who who don't who are like I can laugh at anything, right? Well, and it's all like a whole bunch of accidental racism jokes. I
don't think it's accidental, but anyway, the way I would say it is we technically live in a free country. They have the right to produce this game. I have the right to say it's crap. And then, let the chips fall where they may, I guess. Ultimately, they have the right to do that. I have the right to call them out on it. And
well, it's like, we have the right to say anything we want, but a lot of people don't realize is that you also have you have to take responsibility for what you do.
Yes. You can't be consequence free.
Yeah, you can't just run your mouth and expect to get. You have the freedom to do that. But you got to take responsibility for what's coming out of your mouth.
Absolutely. And I agree with that, especially, as an educator, I have students all the time. It's like, well, you can't give me a detention. It's free speech. I'm like, you want to test that?
You can say whatever you want, but there will be consequences for what's coming out of your mouth.
What's interesting, TC, is that with Cards Against Humanity, I think there's less responsibility for the content that's in that game, and especially when people play the card, it's like I didn't write the card, right? But who did write the card? That'd be interesting, to take it'd be a fun roast of Cards Against Humanity because they seem to have all these we're actually liberal left wing people, but the game that they sell is just has so much vile content that's
If you look at what they do as a company, I would love it if they had a product I could actually support. But
I mean, let's get everybody who made the game. Let's get everybody who contributed cards to the game all in a panel, and I'm going to take like a dozen at least. I could find at least a dozen of those 500 cards that's like, okay, whoever wrote this card, could you raise your hand? And it's like, I will guarantee you that there's going to be some of those cards that were written by people that are not in the affected group that pokes fun at. You know, that are like, you are not a member of the minority whose card you wrote here. Like, just imagine what you've done making this covert racism happen in so many places. Like, that'd be a fun way to roast that company. They should roast themselves. They should listen to this podcast and roast themselves. I challenge you, Cards Against Humanity creator, whatever his name is, Max, that guy that, you know, think you're making the world a better place. Let's line you guys up and let's talk about those cards that you wrote.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, it's on you too, because if I went to a game night and I had played a couple games and someone says, now we're going to do Cards Against Humanity, I'd be like, I won't, you know, you guys are welcome to. I like all of you, but I'm leaving. This isn't for me. And I've done that, not with board games, but with other things. When I was young as a teenager, we would play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of people in our group, for some flippin' reason, I have no idea why, they started to think vandalism was fun. So they would leave game night and go do things like slash people's tires and this and that and the other thing. And they would always try to get me to go. They're like, oh, you should come with us. It's so much fun. I'm like, no, I don't think that's okay. Like, you know, I'll sit and role play with you guys, I guess. You know, we've been doing this a long time and I like you, but that's where it ends. When you guys go to do that, I'm going home.
This could be a whole nother episode about peer pressure.
Peer pressure and all that.
And be like, and the story of my life, how I isolated myself being the geeky nerd who didn't do anything, who felt uncomfortable doing anything, going out with the guys and doing stupid. But, you know, 20 years later going, that actually wasn't a bad decision I made. Which is crazy considering I was like 18, you know, and didn't know.
And you felt like you were being the loser, but later on you're like, man, that was the right thing to do. There's a rabbit hole to go down. I do want to just say one more thing about that Cards Against Humanity roast. And that's, you know, like, just like anything else, human beings, right? The card, if it's pervading, you know, like a, you know, covert racism, if it's facilitating that or causing it, that's the issue. Is the card, and it's not the human being. But I will just tell you, you know, that like if you're in the affected group and you write a card about that, I guess that's okay. But you're kind of like making yourself a spokesman, and that's a whole other can of worms. So anyway, guys. Thank you for bringing that up, TC. It's interesting.
It was just something I found myself on Wednesday, and I really wanted to talk to you guys about.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could work that one out. So, yeah, Problems of the World have at least have one more solution, you know, to go from from this podcast.
Let's be obvious. If everyone did my solution, it would just be a better place.
Yeah, the world would be full of creepy weirdos.
Yeah. I'm just gonna close. I'll clone myself and genocide the rest of the human race. That's what we're going to do.
You know,
hype.
There would be
hype.
A certain.
What's this hype I hear about?
in that example, leave me alive, Andy, and I'm going to sell all the kombucha.
Hey, Trent, what's your hype? I want your hype.
All right, Trent's got an 18XX looking game that he's hyping.
Looking? What do you mean looking?
He's got an 18XX game.
Yeah, that's much better. It's actually is an 18XX game. I'm going to talk about 18 Chesapeake.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah, which is basically a game that I think is designed to be the ultimate intro to 18XX. I think it's intended to be the one that you sit down and teach people with that shows off the front of the system. It got played some at HeadyCon last weekend or a couple weekends ago or whatever that was. I lose all track of time. And it got very good reviews for being that kind of game. And I think based on what I've been reading about it, I'm going to pick it up and it's going to become the one I use to teach. I had been thinking about picking up 1889 for that purpose, but I think I'm just going to hold out and get 18 Chesapeake.
I heard 18 Lilliput was the one to maybe.
Well, that's why I said 18XX looking, because Trent, I don't know anymore. 18 Lilliput is not an 18XX game by like.
Oh God, I can't work.
Yeah, it's like a card game where you're like tiling and it's
no, but legitimately, 18 Chesapeake. I've heard several people say that they will never use 89 to teach the system again with that one in existence.
Yeah.
How long does it play? You said
it's a shorter one.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, legitimately, they say it. From what I've heard, is it teaches the system better than 1846 and 89. So
I haven't moved on from 1846, so I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, so I'm intending to get that to be my one that I use to teach.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'd definitely give that one a try. It falls within the ones I'd be willing to try. What I question though is is it that way for now? Because I think a large reason that people were looking for something to replace 1889 or 1846 is just because of how frequently they've used it, right? Like not. So I kind of question whether or not it's because of a fundamental reason that makes it easier to teach, or is it because just people that are 18xx teachers have they have just bored themselves to death by teaching the same game over and over and over.
Yeah, I've known a lot of people that happily will teach 89 to people that from HeavyCon have said Chesapeake replaces it if you're talking just a cheap teaching purpose.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, I got a quick hype here, and that is for a game that's currently running on Kickstarter from Academy Games called The Tudors. It is Tudors, so like Henry VIII,
that Roch's show on Showtime, right?
Oh, this is the one that has like the hand or something, right?
Yeah, so every player has like a player screen, except it looks like a hand, like a hand that's stretched out and facing sort of like palm towards the players, fingers towards the sky. And what you'll do in the game is collect like favors that represent these 7 different factions. And there's actually plastic rings that you're going to affix a sticker to them. So this has got an interesting, I guess, table presence that's not present in most Euro games. Honestly, though, I have not read enough about the gameplay. I'll just say that it looks a lot like, it's got Dennis Lausen's artwork, and it looks a lot like Voyages of Marco Polo or the more recent Rajas of the Ganges, applied to a more, like just your sort of pre-Victorian England. So, like medieval, I don't want to say medieval, but, like the Church of England era, the Tudors era. I mean, that's what they call it, right? Tudor houses.
The one thing I've heard from people is as much as you think the hand thing is a gimmick, it's actually very gameplay useful.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can see, like, you can look over at somebody's screen and see what they have, like, access to, these favors in. And so it's, like, really important that be a very conspicuous information thing.
And I can't remember if it's this game or a different one about Henry VIII where you, like, know what round you're on based on which wife is currently alive.
It's not this one. That's like Here I Stand, I think. Yeah. Here I Stand has got the wife progression of Henry VIII.
Oh, okay.
Among about 50,000 other things going on in that game.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the Tudors. They've unlocked, like, what they did, interestingly enough, this has a Kickstarter exclusive, but it's entirely cosmetic. So are you okay with those things, Andy?
Usually.
Cosmetic. So it's miniatures, and the game doesn't need them, right? The game didn't originally come with miniatures. It's like you get a box of miniatures. Like it was an add-on that you could purchase from Mare Nostrum, where it came with all these miniatures. Well, this one comes with all these large miniatures that represent your lords and ladies, and but so it's an extra box that would be an extra nice thing that comes with it, but it's absolutely not necessary to be able to play the game. Like all of the gameplay things seem to be getting added to the core box, and then they're just going to have that box of miniatures that has any of the other sort of like cosmetic upgrades. So it's definitely one that, like, I mean, I enjoy that there is something. Well, let's put it like there. I don't want to say I enjoy, but I probably wouldn't back this project unless, to back something on Kickstarter, I either need a discount or I need the exclusives. Otherwise, it's like, why would I back this? Why would I not just wait for it to get on the shelf so that way I can play it before I buy it? Like, why would I make the upfront investment unless I've got something to earn or something to have in return? And so here you've got the exclusives, but they're not going to affect the gameplay. But there's a large group of people out there who, like, go crazy over a gameplay specific, or not a gameplay, but a cosmetic exclusive that really does ratchet up the game. It does affect other people much more than me, and maybe that's why it'll end up working out in the end. But that's why I'm hyping the Tudors from Academy Games, currently on Kickstarter. And Andy's got a mean one for you.
Speaking of ethically questionable,
a mean one that looks sweet.
Oh yeah,
theme that seems sweet.
So yeah, I have a copy of Pixie Queen on the way, coming from Game Surplus. This looks like, at first when I heard about this game, I just kind of wrote it off. But I heard a little bit more about it. I watched Heavy Cardboard's playthrough of it, and this is kind of my type of Euro, where this game is mean. Like, it's just vicious. And it's both other players being horrible to you and the game being horrible to you. So the thing that piqued some of my interest at the beginning was when I heard about the score track. It goes to +20 and -60. And it's kind of like Dungeon Lords. It's like Dungeon Lords. If you end in the positives, you were doing really, really well. So basically, it's a worker placement game, and all your pixies start out in the mines, and you're trying to work your way up the pixie social status track because the queen is awful. Awful. And so it's going to turn up. She's going to want a certain kind of food every round. And so you do all this worker placement stuff to get the food, and then you kind of do a blind bid. And the blind bid determines few things. First, not only does the Pixie Queen like food, but she also likes getting gold and silver, because you have to move up on the gold and silver tracks, because at the end of every round, if the queen is unhappily not getting enough gold and silver for her jewelries, you're all taking negative points. The problem is, if everybody blind bids gold and silver and nobody gave the queen the food she wants, then she's really ticked off and none of you get a reward phase.
Oh.
So, like, if everyone's like, I'm going up on the gold track this round, man, someone else can give that dang honey, then nobody gets benefited. So somebody's got to do it. Yeah, so it's basically kind of that mechanisms. And then you get to promote your pixies, like moving them up out of the mines. But when you do so and you put them on a worker placement spot, some of the spots require 2 of your discs, 2 of your workers. Mm-hmm. If you promote one of your pixies into that spot, it now only takes 1 disc of anybody's. So you make it easier for everyone to take that action. And the other thing you can do is the queen, while she wants different food, she's always kind of partial to apples. So, Joe, if you're like, I'm going to promote my pixie here, I'm going to be like, you know what? I wanted that spot. Hey, queen, here's an apple. He doesn't need that. And you don't get to promote your pixie.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't need that. No.
He doesn't need that.
Actually, nah.
And there's one spot where you can just like give -1 to 3 points to another player. So this, it's an evilly vicious, mean game. And for Euro, that makes it very interesting to me. So, like, apparently you can even get people's pixies chained up in the mines, and then they cannot promote.
Nice. Yeah.
So, it's just evil. It even has player elimination. Like, if you go below -60, you're thrown into something called like the Gate of Obliteration or something. You're just eradicated from existence.
So what I got all of this is that this is what Caverna should have been.
My current thought of a game night is we start with an Infamous Traffic. We play Age of Steam, and then we end with Pixie Queen, and the theme of the night is I'm going to make you cry.
I was about to say, the theme should be it will end in tears.
It will end in tears. Yes, that's exactly it.
Well, TC now has the option to make this podcast end in tears with rounding out our hype section.
Yeah, okay, I have what I'm going to sneak in here. I was told to ask about a card game you may or may not have played. I am very excited at some point to hear you talk about it.
Trent. Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about it at some point. No, yeah.
So my hype.
You want to do that right at the end here, though, because like this is that point in the episode where a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't really like the hype," so I'll, they're like, I'm not big into the hype section. They're like, I skip over the topic, or they just, they just download our episode because I asked them to, and then they just skip to the very end of it because they really like the theme music on the end.
Yeah. My hype is Joe played Legend of the Five Rings, and I am stoked to hear his impressions of it. They'll be coming somewhere, somehow in the future. But
well,
I also,
I guess to spoiler alert, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Trent actually played Unicorn. I played the Lion Clan, and I played.
Oh my god, you were softballed by Trent.
Yeah, well, the thing was though, what he did is he had his well, I don't know, want to say he had, but his son volunteered to make a deck that I could play against Trent, and his son is used to only making Phoenix decks, but he made like a Lion deck basically for the purpose of having something that I could play, and then I think Trent did his best to play, by the best he could have done within Unicorn because of how weak it currently is. And it was a super close match. It came down to that last round to that, both of us got a swing. I was able to land Trent's swing. I was able to deflect it. And then I was able to send a kitchen sink that took out his stronghold. But yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, it's got an interesting way of doing the way that some of your cards come out and you can see access to them. The way it does like your second deck and second hand is something I'm still trying to really understand. But it's cool. Like the choices that you have to make are really, really cool. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I told Trent, man, what I really need is I need somebody that's really close to me, that's really easy to access, that'll get into this with me. That's what I need for an LCG to take hold for me. So it's not at this point, it's not like that there's an issue with the game. It's that there's an issue with the issue is with my schedule not really, my gaming time not working out with.
So the
Caroline is never going to go for
a firm goal for the GBU is to find you an L5R partner. Okay, we've got
that lives close to me though.
Yeah, okay, There we got our benchmark. We've got our benchmark. Okay,
we'll just train Froley.
The dog, he's gonna lick the cards. You licked it.
Email everyone I know. Do you play L5R? Where do you live? Do you play L5R? Where do you live?
Yeah, well, you can find one here in Boone, Iowa. There's definitely a possibility. So that's what I need. I need somebody who's going to take it to that next level. And everybody that I know that plays card games here in Boone plays like Magic. I mean, that's just what it's Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh. It's always a CCG. The people it really takes a crossover between Trent's that perfect example of an LCG player because you have to love. I think you have to love something about board games and something about the the pre-constructed deck. That's your somebody who enjoys and appreciates the things that they like about the CCG, but are not sold by, the lottery aspect of its distribution. And there's your LCG crew, which, that takes some intersection. And it's sad to me that it does because I want to think of LCGs as being an evolution, but honestly, they're not selling near as much as the CCGs out there. So nobody thinks like me. I'm crazy. I'm weird. And that's why I'll never be popular or successful.
Well, and then to end it, I actually got in a game of Altiplano.
Okay, yeah, your actual hype.
I just wanted to give you a prop there because I'm a cool guy. It's a bag building game from the same guy who did Orleans, and I came in with like little to no expectation of this thing, and I don't know if it was the alpaca. I don't know what it was about the game, but I found it rather oddly enjoyable and soothing, and I want to explore this a little more because it kind of caught me off. Oh, you guys whoa, really? So I want to explore this a little more, and I think I would like to discuss it with you guys because it was interesting. I think there might be something here. I could be wrong, but I think it'd be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I'll play it if alpacas spit like llamas, and that's a game mechanism.
Well, the first player marker is a giant alpaca, and I'm sure we could rig it somehow. To do whatever you want.
Give the little, the thing where you pump it and the bird spits the water. Make it
It'll be the Andrew Dennison edition of Altiplano.
I'm sure they probably have one of those, man. That sounds like something that definitely exists. In some hipster market, where it's the bird thing, but it's an alpaca that does it instead. I mean,
the only time I've ever seen a llama do that was to my daughter at the zoo.
Yeah.
Oh, that had to be some sort of poetic justice from a parental perspective.
No, well, and my daughter's animal crazy and freaky on that. So she, we're going through the pettings and she's like, "Oh, a llama," and it's just like, And
demon llama
she's so in love with animals, and she's like, I'm never washing my face again.
yeah, no, she loved it. She wanted it to spit on her.
Oh,
again.
that's actually heartwarming. That's so cool.
Like she had this big like smile on her face. As, like, the quiddles
How many
blowing
kids?
her hair
How many
back.
kids? How many young girls are gonna get spit on by a llama and have a reaction that's like, oh, cool?
So if
Yeah,
you
she
guys
likes
are in a
snakes
game
too,
group
so.
and you see this game, give it a shot and let me know what you think. Because I think it'd be fun to explore it a little bit and have
I
a.
think Trent's played it a few times. I
Really?
still haven't got to.
Altiplano, yes. I played it 3 or 4 times.
What would you think? Did you like it?
I liked it. I liked it better than Orleans.
Wow, I had the same impression. That's crazy.
The biggest reason was I like the fact that the board setup is variable.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that like the islands can be in a different order. And I also like the fact that it didn't turn into just a race for buildings.
Yeah.
Which is what I often felt like Altiplano or what Orleans was.
Well, cool. I'll play it some more and maybe I'll discuss it and we can talk about it. I found it a rather fascinating game.
Well, it sounds really cool, TC, and I've been still wanting to get it played, but it's it's one of those that's taken a bit of a back burner. But yeah, I mean, I'm still up for. I would love to play it sometime. So
be warned that punching that game is an event because everything has to be punched out in that game. So
it's just like a bunch of punch boards, huh?
Yeah, it's a bunch of punch boards. It's like a whole heavy box of punch boards.
It's like no cards. It's just
if it beats Antiquity, I'll be impressed.
Oh, well, I didn't say that. I just said it caught me by surprise.
It's a competition here. Kilogram count of cardboard and
I'm not saying it's such a ballsy game that they put it in a package you don't even with a blank back. You don't even know what's in it, and they charge $130 for it. Okay, Splotter's like the ballsiest designers I've ever seen in my life for that fact alone. Like, buy it. It's $130, and you don't even know what you're going to get. Good luck.
That's awesome. Well, Mer says,
like, honestly, after I got 18 OE to a playable state, anything else now, I was just like,
yeah, I was like,
it didn't take 4 hours.
So it sounds like Mer says he preferred Orleans as well or not Orleans, sorry, Altiplano to Orleans as well, because it did have that, sort of like where you draw through your entire bag, which is part of my issue with Orleans is just like, either you get to the point where you draw your entire bag, which is where a lot of people get in Orleans, or you end up, where you've got that one gold meeple that you really, really need, and it's just stuck there in your bag and you never get it. And that's part of that's basically
We've already got a game discussion for next episode. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I hope to play it sometime, man. So,
I think we got a bot there.
Yeah, we did get a bot. We got a bot in our chat, and that tells us that we have been broadcasting for long enough. Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. They really pegged this bot that seems to think that we're wanting to date for sex. Really pegged the right podcast with 4 married guys.
We're talking about Colonial Twilight, and this comes up.
What an absolute loss! Yeah, this is fantastic. I almost don't even want to. I'm going to report it. Just this is just awful. But yeah,
you hear Twitter today. There was 2 bots that somehow linked into each other and just circling each other for hours.
My students know that I broadcast this podcast. So what's your favorite game? Dating for sex. Nice, Trent. Let's get them involved. Thanks for joining in our chat. So,
oh, God.
Oh, man. Well, guys, it has been a wonderful episode here. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks, everybody who's been here in our chat. And also, I'm wishing you all to have a great week of gaming and catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.